High-tech alchemy at Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126 Dr. John D. Who are you? William blurted out. Although he knew that the other person was Quirinus Quirrell, and perhaps because his physical body was destroyed, he had to piece together such a broken temporary substitute in the Forbidden Forest, but William was not in the mood to take care of the other person's emotions. Tisk, this is really sad. Buffalo, isn't it you who made me become what I am now? But I need to thank you for my invitation to you, which is still valid until now, Quirrell said sarcastically. I'm sorry, Professor Quirrell, I still have to reject your kindness. There are irreconcilable differences between you and your master on how to deal with ordinary people. William spread his hands and replied regretfully. He heard Hagrid take a breath of cold air, as if he was very shocked that this faceless monster was Quirrell, but Lupin showed a calm expression. He obviously had a certain psychological expectation. Something is wrong. William instinctively noticed a hint of abnormality. The fire around the camp was growing and about to spread outward, but Quirrell was still chatting with him calmly, as if nothing had happened. About ordinary people? What influence will they have? Just make up some excuse to fool them and blow up their leaders. They are like a bunch of fools. They will only walk on the ropes we want them to walk, and they will be grateful to us. Quirrell laughed arrogantly. His words made William feel a little strange. Join hands with me, Buffalo. I have seen through the secret you are hiding. Join me and we can establish a great era that wizards have never seen before. Wizards no longer need to hide themselves, but like in the past, they will become guests of ordinary people, if you want to call them that. Quirrell made a very sincere invitation. You are not Quirinus Quirrell, William blurted out again. There is a very different point in the other party's words from both Quirrell and Voldemort, that is, this is feasible. Voldemort wanted to use the power of black magic to integrate the wizarding world and then rule the world of ordinary people. But Voldemort's plan was doomed to fail, because even if wizards could gain a temporary advantage through legilimency, oblivion, and the Imperious Curse, they would be doomed to fall into a repeated tug-of-war after that. The Imperious Curse was not an easy spell to cast even for adult wizards with Newt-level spell certificates. William estimated that there were at most 100 Death Eaters who could use it skillfully. The repetitive nature of human politics, the complex internal affairs institutions, and the resistance formed by wizards of ordinary origin were enough to put the Death Eaters, who were at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers, into the dilemma of putting out fires everywhere. Of course, they could control the British Prime Minister, and wizards who had a little understanding of British politics would control the whips of the ruling party, the party chairman, the cabinet ministers, and even the idiots and members of the House of Commons. But the civil servants in Whitehall, MI5, the opposition party, and even the non-existent MI6 are destined to play a very obvious role in diversion, eventually exposing the existence of wizards and involving them in a witch hunt of unprecedented scale in the new century. If I'm not Quirrell, then who am I? Quirrell laughed. John D. I'm just curious, didn't Tom Riddle discover your existence? William expressed his confusion. Who is John D.? Hagrid asked Lupin in a gruff voice, but Lupin also shook his head in confusion, indicating that he didn't know. John D0 had passed for hundreds of years, and his status had never been recognized by the wizarding world. Quirrell is John D, which of course seems to be an idea that deviates from reality a little bit, but even Voldemort would make Horcruxes, and John D, whose research in the field of souls is still unmatched, thought of some ways to prolong his life, which doesn't seem to be a new discovery. Besides, John D himself is also a hermetic alchemist. He also has extensive research in mysticism, human anatomy, mathematics, astronomy and other fields. Compared with Voldemort, he is obviously more qualified to become the Dark Lord. I don't know that you have investigated so much, but I still prefer to be called Doctor. John D's voice revealed a hint of surprise and a hint of anger when William called out his name. Riddle is naturally a good opponent, but he is too arrogant and even disdains to spend some energy to investigate. I just used some tricks to make him think that I was just a memory at that time. John D laughed proudly. Did you do anything about Peter Pettigrew? William thought of the abnormality he showed after catching Peter Pettigrew that night. That method was too weird, and it really didn't seem to be from Voldemort's hand. Peter Pettigrew. He's still alive, Hagrid shouted loudly, but was quickly pulled back by Lupin. Hearing this name, Lupin's heart was also in turmoil, but he also knew that now was not the time to pursue these things. Is it the little mouse you found? That riddle thought I wanted to tear up the agreement, and ran out of the castle to threaten me in the middle of the night. How boring, John D answered frankly. It's not complicated, is it? Memories are like paper stored in a soul. When they are complete, they don't take up much space, but if you take the initiative to tear them into countless pieces, the space occupied will increase greatly, and there will be no rules to speak of. An A4 paper and a few hundred pieces of paper torn from an A4 paper may occupy the same space in extreme cases, but in actual operation, a few hundred pieces of paper can easily fill up an entire table. Join hands with me, I will teach you all this, and I also need your help in building a new era of wizards. This era is filled with too many things I can't understand, but you are different because you were born in this era and are even leading this era. John D once again extended an invitation. Under his control, the trolls and werewolves have surrounded the centaur camp. The huge shadows are particularly terrifying outside the firelight. A sour and stinky smell of burning came from the air, as if it was the smell of rotten meat being roasted. You are Heisenberg, aren't you? John D dropped a heavy bomb. Merlin, Penelope, who was originally using a spell to take care of the injured centaur, turned her head and looked at William. If he was Heisenberg, this would certainly explain too many things. But thinking of their acquaintance on the train, kill me, Penelope inexplicably expected William to confirm Quirrell's statement, and also expected him to deny Quirrell. Lupin just frowned slightly. He had heard of the name Heisenberg, but he didn't really know him. Before being invited back to Hogwarts by Dumbledore, he had been busy running around between temporary jobs and had no energy to learn about Heisenberg. If that can still be considered work, he shook his head slightly, throwing some irrelevant thoughts out of his mind, and took a deep breath of the pungent air, forcing himself to cheer up. Lupin had higher expectations for William, a student. He hoped to see a miracle happen again. I think. William did not give a direct yes or no answer, but raised his wand. We can't waste a whole night here, chatting about irrelevant things. He saw a green mark rising above the woods in the distance. When it appeared, it meant that the Weasley brothers had led the house elves to temporarily control the fire that was spreading. This was not a difficult task for wizards. They only needed to use magic to cut down the trees and use the vanishing spell to clean up the dead branches and leaves, and soon they could create a circle of isolated space. Has the thing you were waiting for come to fruition? John D also smiled. While William was talking to him to delay time, he was not idle, but controlled those stupid servants to surround the camp. Attack! He waved his hand, signaling the trolls and werewolves to attack. In John D's opinion, William could only rely on a few dozen centaurs, a wizard, a student, and an absurdly tall fool. I need to collect a few more wizard souls so that I can perfect this body and regain control of magic, John D planned easily. He agreed to cooperate with Riddle's actions just to find such a suitable opportunity to complete his anointing ceremony. Anointing naturally means to smear oil or scented oil on the head of the anointed person to make him accept a certain position, but he wanted to go further than his past self after his rebirth. The wizard's soul is the anointing, the blood of the blessed free soul is the flesh, and the curse is the bone. Even after hundreds of years, he still clearly remembered that in those blurred dreams, he listened to the rhythm of those magnificent voices talking to each other. John D wanted to join in it very much, so he created the angel's words for this reason. Just as John D was looking forward to the frenzied werewolves rushing into the camp and tearing the flesh of the centaurs and wizards apart, he suddenly saw a series of bright lights. Roars rang out one after another, the ground wailed under the heavy load, and the corrupted flesh of the werewolves was torn apart and fell to the ground. Chapter 127 This thing is more effective than a curse. What is this? John D asked in shock. He had indeed considered how William should resist these werewolves who were hypnotized by him with the words "tonight is the full moon night" and the trolls who had bewitched their minds. The best way to deal with them was naturally through fire and light, but John D had transformed their bodies into the form of undead. Although they would still be injured when they touched the fire, they would not feel fear. Through Quirrell's memory, John D was sure that in the current declining wizarding world, except for the troublesome Albus Dumbledore, no one would be able to hinder his plan tonight. But he watched helplessly as the centaurs took out small bags and threw them at the charging werewolves, and then suddenly caused a huge explosion. The centaurs, who were used to using spears and bows and arrows, were now throwing small bags with certain weights. It was simply not easy to throw them across half of the camp. You won't understand even if I tell you. This is mercuric fulminate. Times have changed a long time ago, Doctor, William sneered with sarcasm. He and Penelope stood in front and behind all the centaurs, and the 4 rings on their hands shone brightly, supporting a thick barrier in front of them, blocking all the shock waves generated by the explosion. Mercuric fulminate is a very unstable and explosive mixture, which can usually only be made into very small crystals. When it is in a dry state, even a slight friction or impact will cause an explosion, not to mention a collision with a werewolf with huge kinetic energy. Although mercuric fulminate itself is limited by the particle volume of the crystal, the power of the explosion is not huge. 50 grams of mercuric fulminate is enough to injure the diaphragm of people who are close to it, causing internal bleeding and broken ribs. But William also added a small amount of nitroglycerin and silver fulminate, which greatly enhanced the power of mercuric fulminate. Each small bag contains 1 ounce of a mixture based on mercuric fulminate. Only 10 such small bags are needed to blow a solid house into the sky. For Merlin's sake, Nicholas Flamel almost came up with this thing. William saw in Nicholas Flamel's manuscript a book of hieroglyphics that he had used mercury and silver, as well as various acids to draw prizes, and finally made an amazing explosion, which blew up a basement in Boxburton and half of the garden directly above it. If he hadn't been protected by a lot of spells, he wouldn't have survived to this day. Although this was an accident that even Boxburton was unwilling to admit, Nicholas Flamel still recorded the formula he used at the time in detail in his manuscript. When William checked it a few days ago, he suddenly thought of mercuric fulminate in chemistry. After consulting some chemists, William prepared several batches of mercuric fulminate crystals. He had intended to use them in the construction of the underground factory to speed up the excavation process, but since this happened, he just took them and used them. In order to stably preserve these mercuric fulminate salts, all bags must be cast with a slowing spell, so he had to add a small amount of magic gold fragments to each bag. To be honest, this was an explosion that made him feel a little painful. But it's worth it, isn't it? Besides, I can ask Dumbledore to reimburse me for these when the time comes, and if it doesn't work, I can just deduct it from his account, William thought easily. The effect of the explosion was immediate. The first batch of werewolves who rushed into the camp suffered heavy losses, and broken limbs were the luckiest encounter that most of them could expect. Only a few lucky guys who were slightly behind were temporarily intact because they leaned on the meat pads in front. But this does not mean that they were not affected at all. Even in the state of turning into wolves, their internal organs did not become much stronger because of this. Death had turned into an inverted hourglass, hanging above their heads. The huge giant stepped on the bodies of the fallen werewolves and continued to surround the camp. John Dye gave a signal to ask them to retreat temporarily, but these magical creatures, which were not smart to begin with, became even more stupid after becoming the current state. The giant monster in the front turned its head, but the giant monsters behind pushed the giant monsters in front to continue moving forward. Damn it! Idiots, John Dye thought angrily. If he had a little more time, he could make these stupid beasts retreat, but even John Dye knew that William would not give him such a good opportunity. Sure enough, he saw William raise his hand. Come again. This time, throw more accurately, William shouted the command. With a slight sound, the bright fire bloomed again. The ground of the forbidden forest was shaking, and countless 8-eyed giant spiders ran out of their nests. Even Aragog dragged his huge body and slowly walked out of the underground. The king of the 8-eyed giant spiders almost couldn't remember when he last breathed the unpleasant fresh air. At that time, it was still Hagrid. There was a trace of sadness in his eyes, but in just a moment, Aragog gathered his emotions and ran to the edge of the forbidden forest. First, my descendants were slaughtered inexplicably, and there were those damn hairy creatures and trolls. I heard that the ones in the secret chamber were released again. Now there is such a terrifying shock. This forest is no longer suitable for us to stay. Aragog finally made a decision. Although he was no longer in his prime, even eating now required his descendants to bring the prey to him, but Aragog still decided to struggle one last time. Putting aside the great adventure of Aragog, the king of the Acromantula, John Dee had begun to doubt the correctness of his launch tonight. He spent a lot of time to collect almost all the werewolves and trolls in the Forbidden Forest, but almost lost them all in just 1 minute. Quirrell and Riddle, these two liars, met Merlin's dark devil. He cursed the two wizards who knew nothing about this fulminate of mercury in his heart, but at this moment he had already retreated. This body is already a half-finished product. There is no need to tangle with them here. As long as I find a chance to leave this forest, I will have other opportunities to collect unicorn blood and unicorn horns. From Quirrell's memory, John Dee learned that there were very few unicorns left in the magic world today, but as long as he worked hard enough, he could always find them in a remote forest. Although John Dee was sure that William had no means to destroy his soul had only entered this body not long ago. If he wanted to forcibly separate it, it would inevitably make him fall into a weak state for a considerable period of time. He controlled a giant monster under him and quietly moved backwards, trying to disappear in the shadow of the forbidden forest. Coward! Where do you want to escape to? The tall black-haired centaur Bane shouted loudly. He was so angry that he wanted to grab the spear and chase him, but Hagrid held him tightly. But Bane was not the only one who didn't want John Dee to leave. Doctor, don't go. I'm going to seriously consider your invitation. William exchanged glances with Penelope quietly. After coming to the camp with the help of Lalo, they were not in a hurry to expose themselves and rescue the centaurs, but spent a long time discussing how to deal with Quirrell. Under no circumstances, don't get close to him casually, and don't listen to any sounds. William told Penelope the experience he summed up when he confronted Quirrell last time. To be honest, I still think it's better for you not to come with us. Even if we have made the most adequate preparations, it's too dangerous, but you will still take risks. Penelope looked into William's eyes and said, "Of course. You need a partner, and now you can't find anyone who can help you except me." William couldn't deny it either. The Weasley brothers need to lead the house elves to put out the fire. Jimmy's connection with him is not that close yet. Gemma Farley will naturally be willing to help, but William has too many secrets that are not suitable for her to know for the time being. "You'll win, won't you?" Penelope's eyes were shining as she spoke. She had witnessed William create too many miracles. He seemed to be different from all the students at Hogwarts. That bright light made William unable to deny or refuse. "Okay. Wear these first." William nodded helplessly and agreed to Penelope's request. He took out 8 rings, 4 of which were attached with a rune word guardian, and the others were Glacier, Glory, North Wind, and Thorn. "Let me make it clear first. These are this year's Christmas gifts. Don't expect to receive anything else during Christmas." He quickly but carefully explained the uses of the rings and formulated a tactic based on them. Now is the time to turn the tactic into reality. Rune word Glacier. The shadows of 3 runes briefly appeared on a ring on Penelope's right hand, and then quietly disappeared. Countless icicles shot out from the top of Penelope's wand, like an ice dragon, smashing down unreasonably. "Humph," John Dee snorted disdainfully. If I hadn't lost the rat, although his body could not cast direct spells for the time being, he could only rely on the angel language engraved on his soul to form a limited land kingdom, but this did not mean that this body was a mortal body. The giant monster used as a means of transportation was transformed into flesh and blood by him, and thanks to the rich resources of the Forbidden Forest, John Dee was able to give full play to what he had learned, which greatly improved its skin's resistance to spells. "Unless they use a powerful unforgivable curse, they can't hurt me." John Dee had sufficient confidence, but then he found that the landing point of the glacier was not his body, but his feet. Of course, that was just to restrict his movement. Because the real output is William, who has already flown into the air with a shock spell, and there are several small bags of mercuric fulminate mixture floating in front of him. "Wadiwasi," he whispered the spell. The small bags shot out like bullets. "This thing is much better than the evil spell." Refer to the power of mercuric fulminate in Breaking Bad. The equivalent of the small bag of old white is 50 grams, which should be added with silver fulminate. If nitroglycerin is added, the power will be even greater. Although this thing is a controlled substance, the synthesis formula is actually not complicated. It was originally a product of alchemy. Refer to the Mythbuster. 250 grams of pure mercuric fulminate, about the size of a brick, can blow up a house. Chapter 128, Blazing Flames. Wadiwasi is a small spell that is more of a prank than a practical one. Its only function is to launch small pieces of things at a very fast speed. But John Dee obviously has a completely different view on this at this moment. He even wants to curse. Boom. 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 The Forbidden Forest seemed to have an earthquake. The ground was shaking violently. The continuous explosions forced the centaurs with keen hearing to cover their ears. "Damn it. Bastard. Thing." John Dee knelt on the ground in embarrassment. His legs, which were also skinless, had been pulled out of the giant's body. The giant had become like a tattered rag sack, with deep wounds that could be seen all over the body, and black and green dirty blood stuck together. He spent a lot of effort to cultivate and strengthen his body. When facing a dimensionality reduction attack, it was as fragile as paper mache, but to be honest, it was at least multi-layer reinforced cardboard. The body is weak, and the machine rises. William had burned nearly 10 ounces of mercuric fulminate mixture on the troll. Such a large amount of explosives was enough to blow up a house, but it only seriously injured the troll. If I hadn't found other wizards in this damn forest to extract the elements of magic, how could I have fallen into this situation? John Dee felt a little confused and resentful. But there was not much fear. Unlike Voldemort, who was morbidly arrogant due to inferiority, and who divided his soul into many pieces and stored them separately because of a serious lack of security, his immortality was built on another path. Stop, you have already won, Buffalo, John Dee said weakly. He didn't open his mouth, but his voice rang directly in the ears of everyone around him. This seemed to be a special ability of his. You want knowledge, don't you? I can teach you the angelic writing I created, necromancy, and many alchemical formulas, including the great project I researched. You may know that I was once the advisor of the queen of the largest empire in the Muggle world, and I had the opportunity to come into contact with many secrets and legends that you can't imagine. This is of course not false at all. The Great Project is not a name that can be easily given in alchemy, but specifically refers to the ultimate goal of alchemy, the Philosopher's Stone. John Dee threw out a very tempting bait. But how do I know that after you tell me the secret, you won't betray us and retaliate against us? William took out more small bags of fulminate of mercury salt and floated them into the air, while Penelope used her magic wand to raise a bright ball of light and let it float above John Dee's head. They were already some distance away from the Centaur camp. William and Penelope had been cooperating with each other and always kept a distance from John Dee. Remus Lupin wanted to chase after them at first, but his physical condition was too bad. Before William arrived, he and the centaurs fought against the werewolves together, and a werewolf that jumped out of the shadows bit him hard on the right leg. Fortunately, he was already a werewolf, so it was impossible for him to become more of a werewolf. But there were also centaurs who were bitten by the transformed werewolves. God knows what changes will happen to them. We can sign an unbreakable contract. There is no reason for us to be hostile to each other, John Dee made a suggestion. An unbreakable contract is a very strong magical contract. In order to ensure that both parties to the contract strictly abide by the contract, it adopts a simple idea. If the contract cannot be guaranteed to take effect, the person who violates the contract will be eliminated, so that the contract will no longer exist. We all want to change the status quo of the magic world, don't we? I tried to do this a few hundred years ago, but those stupid wizards stopped me and even erased my name from the history of wizards. 500 years ago was the era of John Dee. He graduated from Cambridge and was a genuine Earth OL protagonist template. He traveled around the world to give lectures, served as an advisor to 3 British kings, and was the first to propose the concept of the Great British Empire. He can also be regarded as the founder of a school of thought in the study of magic. But now almost no wizards remember that he existed. What I want to do now is to save the magic world, which is already in great danger, and pass on my knowledge and name again. Is this too much? This does not seem to be too much. Penelope, what do you think? Do you want to agree to him? William suddenly shouted loudly, asking Penelope on the other end. John Dee's drop package will obviously also have a share for her. William never hesitates to share the harvest. I don't know. I was just wondering why we have never heard of this Dr. John Dee. I mean, if he is really that famous, even the Dark Lord. Penelope didn't specify which one she was referring to. But her words do make sense. Maybe it's because if Dr. John Dee, your knowledge, or the angelic writing, is learned by others, they will be affected, William said his guess. John Dee didn't answer. He had no face, only flesh and blood, so naturally there was no expression to read. This seems a bit absurd, but the hidden knowledge itself may also contain toxicity when it is spread. It certainly won't make people sick, but it is equally dangerous, just like the blue whale that William had heard of in his previous life, or those urban legends such as Pen Fairy. Although Riddle was arrogant, William really didn't think that when a piece of his soul was in Quirrell's body, he would not be able to detect John Dee's little movements. The real change should have happened on the eve of Halloween. At that time, Quirrell was entangled by us and used the magic represented by the angel's words. It was at that time that he became John Dee. This was of course just William's guess. The actual situation is likely to be more complicated than this, but it did not prevent William from making a decision. John Dee was not as important as he thought. A person who lived 500 years ago still had a long way to go to adapt to modern society. Although his knowledge was invaluable, what William lacked the least now was knowledge. But without John Dee, it was very important to him. This old monster who is resurrected in the modern world, but whose thinking was still 500 years ago, would only pose a threat. What do we see? William shouted the spell softly, and a dozen small bags filled with a mixture of mercuric fulminate salts shot out at John Dee like bullets. His eyes also showed a fierce look, and his skinless body suddenly swelled up, and a magnificent and weird blood-color mist bloomed out. A loud bang sounded. The black soil in the forbidden forest was blown away, along with the dead branches and leaves, and the unlucky trees nearby, and were thrown into the air. But the blood-color mist penetrated the smoke and dust and spread rapidly. Glorious. The shadows of 3 runes flashed by. Although he had repeatedly reminded Penelope, William still shouted out to remind her. And a ring on his right hand had already burst into a bright and warm golden light. It turned into a barrier that was constantly stirring and filled with warm heat from the heart, blocking the blood-colored light. Incendio Maxima, flame is blazing. William raised his wand and shouted the spell loudly. A vortex of flames rushed out from the top of his wand, and spread rapidly with him as the center. This flame was not hot, and it could not even ignite the dead leaves in the forbidden forest, but its scale was huge, and it spread with rolling heat waves. It had only one mission: the flame became the carrier of glory. This huge crimson flame vortex was dyed with a bright gilded color by glory, as if it was a holy judgment descended from the Silver City, washing away all sins. Quietly, the ring on William's right hand, which he had attached the rune word glory with the existence spell, had quietly broken and turned into a handful of worthless black ash, but William promptly replaced it with his own magic power. The blood-color mist was squeezed by the golden flames little by little, and it kept retreating backwards, but even so, it still couldn't stop its decline from being swallowed by the flames. It condensed into a ferocious beast head, and turned into a desperate human figure struggling and wailing, but all futile struggles would only bring it one step closer to the end. What's going on? William suddenly felt that the speed of his magic power consumption slowed down. The blood-red mist that John Dee had transformed into suddenly dissipated a large part, leaving only the most condensed part as the core. It was a dark red mist, and its head formed the appearance of a face. William had seen it once not long ago. But now the firelight illuminated its face very clearly. It was a face of a middle-aged man with a high nose bridge and was considered very handsome. The red mist made a dizzying scream and was about to rise and escape. Although escaping in such a rough way that severed the bond between soul and body meant that John Dee would experience a miserable life for a considerable period of time, he was at least alive. He was not afraid of death. But if he had a choice, he still didn't want to die. The real John Dee had died 500 years ago. Now he was just a creation that inherited the consciousness and memory of John Dee, but for him, he had never really lived. A wonderful inspiration emerged in William's mind. It was difficult for him to describe whether it was a spell, knowledge, or even black magic, white magic, transfiguration, instinct, or talent, but William knew what he should do at this moment. He waved his wand at the blood mist. A silver-white silk net appeared out of thin air in the air, tightly wrapping the blood mist in it. Each of its threads seemed to be woven with unicorn mane, emitting a clean luster in the night sky, so beautiful that it seemed like a product of this world. Chapter 129 Net. Suddenly being covered by the web, John Dee felt fear for the first time in his heart since his rebirth. He realized that if he didn't do something quickly, this web would be enough to capture his soul and even threaten his existence. But even John Dee himself was not sure whether he would be able to get rid of his current predicament, even if he did something. This silver web trapped him tightly, although John Dee did not feel hurt at the moment. But even the trolls knew that the real threat of the spider web was not the spider web itself, but the spider. Is this the fallen British magic world? Where did these monsters come from? John Dee felt that he was really wronged. He desperately hit the silver web, trying to struggle out a small exit, but his struggle was in vain, and the mouth of the web was slowly but firmly tightening. A difficult choice was placed in front of him. John Dee had to give up something and transform it into the purest soul power before he had a chance to leave this terrifying giant web. This was not a serious problem. In the long years he had lived, He had enough memories to discard. As a human being, he also had many emotions that were not worth keeping, but now he did not have so much time to choose. Memory or consciousness? There was no more difficult choice than this. Burning consciousness. Although he had a wealth of knowledge and experience, he was likely unable to make accurate judgments, just like a strong man with a huge physique like a giant, but did not know how to exert force and how to punch. But if he burned his memories, John Dee did not know how much he would have to pay, and how much of the past he would forget. It was his past experiences that defined him today. But now, can he really discard his past memories? If he forgot who he was, did it mean that he committed suicide? For Merlin's sake, John Dee took a long breath. For the first time in his life, he also wanted to cross his hands like those muggles and pray for a little luck. But he finally made up his mind. In his soul ocean, large sections of memories were disappearing out of thin air, being transformed into pure light spots. To William and Penelope who were watching outside, it seemed that the volume of the blood mist suddenly began to shrink again, and became thinner. It suddenly exerted force, dangerously passed through the silver net, and disappeared into the night sky of the Forbidden Forest. It's a pity that he still escaped. William felt a little regretful. To be honest, if it wasn't too dangerous to keep John Dee, William would actually be very interested in many of his knowledge. Whether it was the techniques of manipulating memory and soul, the black magic of flesh and blood synthesis, or the necromancy that could shape the soul personality, there was a lot of room for him to explore. William waved his wand, turning the silver spider web into a ball of light, which disappeared into the air. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Penelope, who came over, asked worriedly. She saw William wave his wand and make the silver spider web disappear, and then she was stunned. "It's okay, I'm just a little tired." William waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to worry about himself. This was of course just an excuse. The moment the spider web disappeared, he suddenly felt a chill. It was a warm current that came from nowhere, but instantly spread throughout William's body. "What's the situation with that spider web?" William carefully recalled the moment just now when John Dee turned into blood mist and wanted to escape as easily as before, without paying any price. "I seem to want to stop him, but I don't know how to do it, and suddenly I have an inspiration. Well, this is magic." With a mess in his mind, William had to temporarily give up the idea of studying this problem clearly. He raised his head and saw Penelope staring at him with glowing eyes. For Merlin's sake, even when facing John Dee and having to stay highly focused at all times, William never felt so nervous. He didn't forget how he praised the genius of Heisenberg in the past, and how he criticized the shops in Diagon Alley one by one in the name of Heisenberg. Although in a sense, what William said was not wrong, but for him, this was like a public execution. It was a bit like a writer who secretly wrote novels and had a serious job, but one day his colleagues suddenly discovered his inner middle school character. This is simply social death. How did that talkative guy find out, and why did he say it out loud after he found it? William suddenly wanted to find John Dee and then crush his bones to ashes. Of course, he didn't know that one of his die-hard fans, after failing to get any information from William, actually made up his mind to send hundreds of letters to North America, just to find a few words about the whereabouts of Heisenberg. "You can't really be?" Penelope asked cautiously. In fact, she was just as nervous as William. If she had known, the compliments she told William about Heisenberg were actually meant for him. For Merlin's sake, does that mean that Heisenberg was only a second-year student at Ilvermorny at the beginning? Penelope's heart was equally complicated. "The star is right beside me." William opened his mouth with difficulty, and he met Penelope's eyes. The distance between them was only an arm's length. In the Forbidden Forest at night, the evening breeze blew a pleasant sound like wind chimes, and the moonlight, which had not yet experienced the poison of haze, shone through the branches and leaves, casting a silvery white light. In the distance, the forest fire that had not yet been extinguished was still burning, and a slight beeping sound was heard. It was difficult for William to say anything perfunctory or lie. He had never realized as clearly as he did at this moment that the time travel at this moment had increasingly changed from role-playing to immersive experience for him. "Well, I have to tell you sooner or later anyway." Just as William was about to reluctantly admit that he was Heisenberg and give an explanation, he suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" Penelope asked worriedly, took a half step forward, and patted William's right shoulder. She was smart and naturally noticed that in the previous moment, William's eyes suddenly became extremely ugly, as if something bad had suddenly happened. I have to hurry back to the castle, William said seriously. Chapter 130 Good people deserve to be pointed at guns. Just now, William found that a spell he and his friend had left in the small corridor on the 4th floor as a warning was suddenly triggered. This means that someone walked into that corridor. Who could it be? It shouldn't be Dumbledore. He is too smart and will naturally know that the layout of the door is my style. It is unlikely that it was other students. Besides, Professor McGonagall should have tied them up in the hall and would not let them wander around the castle tonight. William carefully considered all the possibilities. But even he knew that there would only be one real answer, that was Voldemort. The old Voldemort calmly walked into the small corridor on the east side of the 4th floor, which meant that something terrible had happened in Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets, and the nature must be extremely serious, which made him unable to even take care of the safety of the Philosopher's Stone. Voldemort, who was at a disadvantage, showed a surprising degree of cunning. Although William didn't know how he did it, to be honest, in this confrontation between Riddle and Dumbledore, Riddle had a greater advantage. John Dee's dark magic and spiritual attainments helped him get relief from his weak and remnant soul state. The lack of power forced Voldemort to pay more attention to the conspiracy and calculation that he was already good at. Being in the shadows, the advantage of the first move through the Chamber of Secrets and Peter Pettigrew to catch Dumbledore off guard gave him a very peaceful buffer period. Perhaps the current Voldemort is the complete Voldemort, not the original socket man who is overwhelmed by the power of dark magic and split his soul into many fragments, so that he became extremely unstable. On the other hand, his opponent, Dumbledore, is the most powerful wizard in the world today, but even the gossip reporter Rita Skeeter will not take him seriously, because Dumbledore is an open card. Within the scope of Hogwarts, Dumbledore, who has the authority of the principal, can apparate, and his spell level is at the ceiling of wizards, is indeed very difficult to defeat, but Voldemort has never thought of defeating him. All Voldemort needs is to distract his attention, and this is actually not difficult. The Forbidden Forest and Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets are not places that can be managed by Headmaster Dumbledore. As for restricting Dumbledore's actions, it is even simpler. He only needs to threaten him with other people. As long as the threat from Dumbledore is removed, a way out is waiting for him. Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick are already very old, and they are needed to protect the students. The remaining Snape and Lupin will naturally not be the opponent of the Dark Lord himself. Good people should be pointed at with guns. William suddenly thought of the classic question in Let the Bullets Fly, but this question obviously does not have a perfect answer. It is precisely because he is a good person that he is pointed at with a gun. But if he uses other means to make others dare not point a gun at him, does it mean that good people are not so good? But fortunately, I am here, William whispered to himself. As a time traveler, he came to this world accidentally. He has been on the same boat with Dumbledore for various reasons, and now he should take action. Dumbledore's man through and through? No, I prefer to say that Dumbledore is my man through and through. William thought he should quickly find a small notebook to record the debt owed by the old bee. Can you take me with you? Penelope asked, biting her lips tightly, looking at William with a complicated look. William was not good at drawing fan-shaped diagrams from her eyes, but he knew what Penelope must be thinking at the moment. Not this time. William shook his head, a little regretful, but still firmly rejected her. Although it was a bit risky to come to the Forbidden Forest, he had made very adequate preparations, and had enough backup and emergency measures, but following Voldemort into the small corridor where the Philosopher's Stone was hidden was a completely unknown challenge. It would be dangerous. Of course, he could pray that the levels that Nicholas Flamel and Dumbledore had worked together could stump Voldemort, but this was like praying that the constellations would really work, and it was more of a placebo effect. Those levels played more of a role in training and monitoring, rather than blocking the Dark Lord's steps. Then hearing William's answer, the light in Penelope's eyes dimmed instantly. I wish you good luck, she said softly, with a little reluctance in her voice. William gently stroked the gold coin used to call the house elf Lalo. Mr. Buffalo. Lalo appeared in front of William and bowed respectfully. The evening breeze in the Forbidden Forest had become a little cold, making him shiver in his teacup cover. Did anything happen in the castle? William snapped his fingers and conjured a bright and stable fire that could be used for warmth, and let it fly in front of Lalo. Dinner is over, but Professor McGonagall asked all students to stay in the hall. Professor Flitwick and Professor Sprout went together to bring back the students who did not come to the hall. Professor Dumbledore, Professor Lupin, and Professor Snape have not appeared yet. Lalo raised his head and answered, shaking his head slightly, feeling much more comfortable. His words confirmed William's guess. Did you feel any vibrations in the castle, or hear any loud noises? William asked another seemingly inexplicable question. He was referring to the arrangement he had left in the small corridor on the east side of the 4th floor. No, Lalo shook his head and replied. This was very strange. William secretly raised his vigilance. Penelope, ask Oakcork to take you back to the castle. The auditorium must be safe. He took out his wand, thought about it, and handed her the shoulder bag for temporary safekeeping. He had put everything he needed in his pocket. As a wizard of the School of Mental Enchantment, he didn't want most of his belongings to be destroyed by the cracking technique. Penelope took the shoulder bag and suddenly hugged William hard. Her action was very sudden and the force she used was very strong, almost making William feel like he couldn't breathe for a moment. But after a second or two, she let go of her hand again. The numbered divination said that you will have a very lucky day, but you will definitely be unlucky tomorrow, Penelope said very seriously. You know I don't believe in prophecy, but, let's hope so. William smiled. Take me back to the 4th floor of the castle, he said to the house elf Lalo. With that familiar slight twist, he found himself standing on the east side of the 4th floor the next moment. The door of the small corridor was wide open. The room leading to Fluffy was dark. Like a huge mouth it was about to swallow William, but he didn't see the small pink porcelain teacup he had placed by the door. It looked almost the same as before William left, but William found that all the traps he left behind had disappeared. Is this a locust crossing? William's face became extremely ugly. Although they were originally consumables, it was still not an easy thing for him to see that these gold galleons were all cleared without even hearing a sound. But there was a more critical question. How did Voldemort do it? William felt a little incredible. The small porcelain cup with a rune array that Dumbledore gave him could play a role in hindering magic. Combined with a full amount of truth, it was enough to cause considerable damage. But no matter what, I have to give it a try. William cast a disillusionment charm on himself and walked carefully into the room where the three-headed dog Fluffy was. This place was completely different from the neat corridor outside and looked very messy. On the ground and walls, there were hideous claw scratches and bite marks everywhere. Fluffy, a huge three-headed dog, was lying at the other end of the room. Half of his body was deeply sunken into the wall, his 6 eyes were closed, and his life or death was unknown. A wooden trapdoor was not far from William, and it had been opened at this moment. Fluffy satisfied Hagrid's yearning for almost everything about magical creatures except explosions. It was tall and had countless deadly means. It was rare and was banned from being raised by the Ministry of Magic. It had a considerable degree of resistance to spells, but it had a very obvious weakness: it fell asleep when listening to music. But this room made up for its last shortcoming. Dumbledore designed this place by himself so that no sound could last for more than 2 seconds, and it could not make a sound again in the next minute, but this was obviously not enough to stop the Dark Lord. William could already imagine the previous scene. Voldemort walked into the room, and Fluffy launched an attack, but was repelled by him with a spell. However, the three-headed dog did not give up, but was aroused by the ferocity in his heart, and madly counterattacked Voldemort. This continued until he got bored and used a powerful spell, completely depriving it of the ability to rise again. But why does it take so long? William keenly noticed something strange. There are too many traces left by the three-headed dog Fluffy here, which means that the battle will not end soon. Fluffy is indeed a difficult opponent, and he has a certain resistance to the power of spells like Hagrid. But it destroyed this room like this, which means that it must have taken Voldemort a lot of time to defeat it, and it must have needed to move constantly to avoid it. Maybe Voldemort is not really that strong now, William made a guess. But this does not affect the danger of Voldemort. Everyone knows that when playing games, even if the values of both sides are at a relatively equal level compared to PvE, the difficulty of PvP is still much higher than PvE. I can only hope that the gender balance is not done well. Lighting a bright ball light on the tip of his wand, William jumped down the trapdoor. Next chapter a few minutes later. Chapter 131, Voldemort greets you. Under the castle's underground. Marcus Flint and Albus Dumbledore stood at the two ends of a passage, staring at each other affectionately, each holding a wand but not moving, one tall and one short, like two close friends. If this wasn't a dark and dirty dungeon, and Dumbledore was not far behind Kingsley, who looked serious and had a wet robe, and Snape, who was sitting against the wall with a pale face, this statement would be more convincing. Flint, put down your wand, think about your family, you are ruining your future, Kingsley persuaded Marcus loudly. It's useless, don't waste your energy, he is not himself now, Snape, who was sitting against the wall, said weakly. He was proficient in brain occlusion and legilimency, and he naturally knew that the strange state displayed by Marcus now showed that he was under the control of the Imperious Curse. It was just a little bit, damn it, just a little bit. If it was me back then, Snape felt a little regretful. Back to a while ago, Daedalus was injured by Marcus's crucio and let out a horrifying scream. Marcus, who was covered in black smoke, had already turned his eyes to Kingsley and was about to swing his wand. Nebulous Snape shouted the spell loudly, and large clouds of mist emerged from the top of his wand, hiding him and Kingsley's figures in it. He had realized that something was wrong with Marcus' current state. Marcus was like a child who suddenly had a cannon stuffed in his hand. Wherever he pointed the muzzle, there would be an explosion, but the technology related to the cannon was missing. In terms of power alone, there was no essential difference, because even if the cannon was inaccurate, he could just fire a few more shots. But this also means that he is not invincible. At least he still has weaknesses that can be exploited, Snape thought, biting his lower lip subconsciously. He bit so hard that some blood flowed into his mouth, but Snape was unaware. He believed that both Daedalus and Kingsley must have discovered this, but discovering this did not mean that they could fight back. Such a powerful spell, Snape recalled a blasting spell that directly blew up the wall. Anyone who was even slightly touched would not have a good ending. The cannon in the child's hand was still a cannon. But now they had no way to avoid it. A large cloud of fog concealed the figures of Snape and Kingsley. They quickly gathered together. Marcus Flint, who lacked real duel experience and became even more stupid at this time, became a little panicked. He was still using powerful evil spells, but he didn't know that what he should do at this moment was to drive away the annoying fog. I have an idea, help me. Cast an illusion spell on myself. Snape squatted on the ground, speaking quietly and quickly. The damp and earthy ground in the passage made him feel uncomfortable. He pulled off the black wizard robe he was wearing with force and put his wand on it. Verdo, the robe instantly split into many tiny snakes and flowed towards Marcus. Expulso, Marcus shouted loudly, releasing a powerful shock wave that blew off a piece of the nearby wall. Grayish-yellow powder fell on Snape's head, making him look even more embarrassed. This was not good news, as it showed that Marcus was thinking and the spell he used was becoming more precise. After waiting for a moment, Snape stood up suddenly, waved his wand, and dispersed all the water vapor created by the spell. The mist not only obscured his and Kingsley's figures, but also their vision. They saw that Marcus had already looked in their direction and was about to use the next spell. But Marcus was also startled. He found that he was surrounded by snakes with gray-black scales and sharp fangs, while Snape and another annoying black wizard disappeared. Run away. Marcus's small head was filled with too many things at this moment. Expulso, he released a spell in front of him. A large number of snakes turned into black smoke and disappeared. This scene made Marcus feel a long-lost sense of control. He felt the power and the status that came with great power. That damn old thing, how dare you say that I am a mistake and not qualified to inherit Flint? Old Flint's face suddenly appeared in his mind, and a layer of haze appeared on Marcus' face, who was originally immersed in the power he had obtained. Almost everyone thinks that being born as the heir of the Flint family is a lucky thing, but in Marcus's view, it is like a curse. His father, Old Flint, would slightly turn his eyes away every time he saw him. Sometimes, Marcus even felt that if there was no other choice, his own father, Old Flint, would even choose to drown him, ending the Flint family, one of the sacred 28 families. Just because he had no talent. Unlike Marcus's tall physique, his talent in magic can only be barely considered above average. Whether it is spells, transfiguration, potions, divination, astronomy, or even the inferior herbal class, he is not good at any of them. As for the history of magic? What is the history of magic? If he had not been born in the Flint family and received some magical education early, he would even worry that he would be sorted into Hufflepuff College instead of Slytherin. A few years ago, when he waited for a long time and finally heard the Sorting Hat reluctantly shouting Slytherin, he felt not honor or relief in his heart, but resentment. Why do they all have outstanding talents, but I, the heir of the Flint family, don't? He envied other people. But fortunately, he was tall and fierce, so he could always bully the unfortunate people who were weaker than him, and on the Quidditch field, Marcus could also play to his strengths. He eventually became the captain of the Slytherin team, and the Quidditch field was almost the only place Marcus liked, but it was only because it was forbidden to use spells on the field. But look at it now, Marcus felt a cruel pleasure in his heart, and he walked in the direction of Snape and the unknown wizard. It's impossible that the wizard who was hit by the Cruciatus curse also ran away, right? But they can't run away. This place is so big, and leaving also requires a password in Parseltongue. That's right. Marcus suddenly felt a little nervous because after the matter was over, he still needed to report to the Great Master, and the Great Master would never be tolerant of losers. Whatever he gave, he would also take away. But in the next moment, Marcus suddenly felt his feet slip, and gravity made Marcus, who was in a daze, fall forward. The ground was covered with water. To turn it into oil, a silent spell was all that was needed. With a thump, he fell heavily to the ground, and his wand slipped out of his hand. Oops, Marcus stretched his hand forward, trying to grab the wand. Although Quirrell had taught them the silent spells that they should master in the 5th grade in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, it was too difficult for him, and Marcus had not mastered it yet. But this was absolutely good news for Kingsley and Snape. What they needed now was to break through the layer of black gas defense, and this did not require any thinking. As long as the power was strong enough, it could make it ineffective in a very short moment. Confringo, Kingsley, who had been brewing for a long time, shouted the spell loudly, and a black flame suddenly appeared, blowing a huge hole in the black smoke surrounding Marcus. It only had a shallow layer left, and although it was replenishing quickly, it was no longer enough to hinder Snape. A Sectum Zempra, Snape hesitated for a moment before shouting out the spell, and then used the Sectum Zempra spell he created, which had great power. The magic power turned into an invisible blade and flew fiercely towards Marcus, who was lying on the ground. It tore through the black mist blocking the front and landed on Marcus' back, leaving a huge and conspicuous wound there. Ah! Marcus screamed in pain. The black and red dirty blood slowly flowed out, but with the impact of a Sectum Zempra, his body moved forward a little. Marcus almost frantically grabbed the wand, turned around and lay on his back, his head facing Snape's direction. Marcus pointed his wand at Snape, who was about to cast a stunning spell, and a powerful transparent shock wave shot out, hitting the thin potions professor like a fly against the wall behind him. Crucio, he shouted the spell excitedly, and the sound echoed in the dark castle. The pain and pleasure twisted Marcus's expression into a crazy look that he himself could not imagine. The black and red light was like a flash of lightning, but it was blocked by a bright red figure. Phoenix Fox fell to the ground, surrounded by flames, and turned into a pile of ash. Enough, Dumbledore's loud voice sounded. He strode to Snape's side, lowered his body, but did not even look at Marcus lying on the ground, as if it was just a stain on the ground that was difficult to remove, or a particularly ugly pattern. Still breathing, Dumbledore muttered to himself. His wand slowly radiated a gentle white light, which gradually calmed Snape's breathing. Kingsley walked to his side, holding the wand, and looked at Marcus vigilantly. After doing all this, Dumbledore stood up straight and turned his head to look at Marcus. "Tom, long time no see." There was no smile on his face. "Greetings from Voldemort." Marcus Flint's expression suddenly became dull and stiff, as if he was being manipulated. "That's bad." Dumbledore's expression was very solemn. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 132, Savage Riddle. This is not Tom Riddle. After seeing Marcus Flint's face, Dumbledore woke up instantly. Tom was probably using the Imperious Curse, or modifying part of his memory, and they will only be activated when they meet the conditions. As for the condition, "Are you waiting for me?" Dumbledore asked a question, but his tone was very affirmative. "Do you like the toy I gave you? My servant Quirrell found this little thing in the forest of Albania. It only takes 9 humans. Wizards are of course better, but those muggles can also be used as preparations for the ritual, and their souls can be transformed into magic that can be driven at will," Marcus said expressionlessly in an adult tone, revealing a cruelty of using humans as fuel. Only 9 lives are needed to create a terrible wizard like Marcus. He is certainly not enough to defeat Dumbledore himself, but at least 3 or 4 very powerful Aurors need to join forces to compete with him. Dumbledore frowned. If 9 human lives could produce a machine like Marcus, then Voldemort had killed at least 18 people, including Quirrell. The Muggles who had explored the Albanian forest with him, and the ritual in Nocturne Alley, were also explained at this moment. Of course I know that you have discovered Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets. In order to control the basilisk, I set a lot of protective spells and an inconspicuous positioning spell on it. It's a pity, because the basilisk is a treasure left to me by my ancestors, but I will naturally have time to make a few more basilisks as I will be immortal. Marcus continued to talk to himself. Rather than saying that this was a conversation, it was better to say that Tom Riddle was using him to triumphantly introduce his evil plan to his old rival. You can't stop me anymore. The loyal Quirinus Quirrell has changed his mind, but the new one is also willing to cooperate with me. While you are running around to put out fires, I will take the Philosopher's Stone like a true winner and come back again, for Merlin's sake. Kingsley sighed. We haven't lost, at least not yet. There's still time. Dumbledore's expression was so serious that it was frightening. His sky-blue eyes seemed to be burning at this moment. Tom, who returned again 10 years later, showed him a darker soul. He was indeed weaker, but also more cruel. You can try to leave me, but the soul of this poor Flint child, Marcus' words stopped abruptly. But Dumbledore, who had been paying attention to him, suddenly contracted his pupils because Marcus's whites were expanding. This strange scene reminded him of Peter Pettigrew some time ago, and the dark wizard who was used to lure the tiger away from the mountain and create opportunities for Quirrell. He had to make a choice. Is it the life of this absolutely not innocent student in front of him, or to thwart Voldemort's arrangement and stop his resurrection plan? Fortunately, I sent Hagrid and Lupin to the Forbidden Forest in advance. No matter what happens there, we can deal with it, but this is not enough to comfort Dumbledore. He wanted to leave, but the wand in his hand was already raised and pointed at Marcus. Legilimens Dumbledore sighed softly and shouted the spell. While Dumbledore was fighting for Marcus' soul, William was also not idle. As a time traveler, he clearly remembered that the second level of the Chamber of Secrets was arranged by Professor Sprout, who planted a lot of devil snares here. In a sense, this should have been the easiest level, because the devil snare is very afraid of light and heat. As long as the person who comes in is a wizard, not a baboon waving a wooden stick, then using Loomis can easily solve the problem. There is just a little problem. Fuck you old bees, William yelled angrily in the darkness. He was tightly entangled by the devil's snare. These dark green vines were constantly tightening, and he began to feel uncomfortable. William was naturally not a baboon waving a stick, at least he didn't think he was. But this room was cursed by Dumbledore, and it couldn't produce any light or fire. Moreover, these devil snares were also tampered with by him, and the power of the spells on them would be greatly weakened. As soon as he jumped down, he found that he had landed in the center of a large cluster of devil snares, and there was no escape. Devil's snare is an extremely dangerous plant that can be used to protect things, but it also has its weaknesses. Devil's snare likes dark and humid environments. It's nonsense to be afraid of light and warmth. William quickly recalled what Professor Sprout said in class. He was sure that she said something else later, but at that time he was plucking a leaf of Christmas cactus while she was not paying attention. He was mainly holding an enthusiastic attitude to learn, not because the thing was fried like rapeseed, and had a special plant fragrance and sweetness. It was especially delicious when cooked with vermicelli, soy sauce and dried chili. Well, I can only take the violent way to break through. He activated the 2 magic gold rings in his hands at the same time, and the rune word glacier turned into a large group of ice, which defeated all the devil snares in front of him, but the effect of glacier was too good, and the strong cold air caused serious damage to the nearby devil snares. This kind of magical plant does like cold and humid environment, but this does not mean that they like to live in the Arctic Ocean. Professor Sprout is so good at herbs, she will always have a way to cure and save them. Feeling that the relationship between him and the head of Hufflepuff College was about to face the most brutal challenge ever, William walked forward quickly. After walking forward for a distance in the dark, he found that he could use Loomis again. William walked forward along a stone corridor, where he could hear the sound of water dripping slowly along the wall. The corridor sloped down, and there were soft rustling and tinkling sounds coming from the front. He came to the end of the corridor, and in front of him was a brightly lit room with a vaulted ceiling. There were countless bird-likes that were as dazzling as gems, and they were fluttering their wings around the room. Noticing William's appearance, They suddenly flew higher and crowded into a corner of the ceiling, like a nest of frightened quails. William remembered that this was a level designed by Professor Flitwick, and among these hundreds of birds under a spell, there was a special key. According to common sense, it should be the youngest seeker who rode on a broom and dug it out from the flock of birds. But there was no broom here. Even if there was a broom, William would not ride it. Switch? Transfiguration? Or just blow up the door? These three methods are very feasible. Even Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel could never imagine that William had a large stock of mercuric fulminate in hand, and since he had taken away the entire wall in the Chamber of Secrets, his mind was suddenly opened. But William finally chose to walk directly to the door opposite the room. He saw a tattered silver key on the ground there. It tried hard to flap its wings to fly, but the wings were already mostly broken. Apparently someone who passed by here before had a similar idea as William, and after succeeding, he casually threw the broken key on the ground like a piece of rag or waste paper. What a barbaric riddle! Not only did he use Professor Flitwick's key like this, but he also destroyed Professor Sprout's devil snare, William thought indignantly, and grabbed the key and stuffed it into the keyhole on the wooden door. With a click, he easily pushed the door open and entered the next room. The lights were bright here. William found himself standing beside a huge chessboard. Facing him at the other end of the room were some white chess pieces. The 12 white chess pieces had no facial features on their hollow faces. Reducto, a blazing red light suddenly shot towards William. Protego, he subconsciously called out a spell and blocked it with a transparent air barrier. Following the direction of the spell, William saw a figure wearing Slytherin wizard robes standing not far from him. He was very tall and had black hair, but his gloomy expression and hooked nose that almost reached his upper lip greatly damaged his appearance. Disgusting buffalo, it seems that you are the secret weapon left by that old thing Dumbledore, huh? I thought it would be that Harry Potter, the chosen one, the savior who defeated the Dark Lord. Drit Yaxley, the male student president of Hogwarts and the future Auror, said easily, looking at William with a contemptuous smile on his lips, as if he had seen something beautiful. To be honest, although I have never liked you, I really didn't expect you to be that person. William turned around and chose to face Yaxley. He originally thought that one night next year, he would really fight with Yaxley at the event of Professor Flitwick's club, instead of today, here, and being watched by Tom Riddle. Let me guess, Tom Riddle is on the back of your head? How could someone as arrogant as you be willing to let him transform you into this half-human, half-ghost appearance? William has always been good at touching the heart. Yaxley's expression suddenly turned ugly, and he stared at William viciously, as if he wanted to eat him up bite by bite. Chapter 133 Game. I cannot allow you to address my great master like that. The contract between us is unbreakable, Yaxley answered slowly. Of all the people in the castle, he saw me and chose me. Only I am qualified to be the carrier of his soul, not that useless professor of defense against the dark arts. Besides, compared to me, you are the truly arrogant one, me. William pointed at himself. I am not a pure-blood wizard, and I don't have a surname like Yaxley. He almost laughed. But when he heard surnames like Yaxley, Yaxley's face became even uglier. You want to act recklessly like you did in the wild land you came from, but it won't work. He raised his wand in his right hand and pointed it at William. In response to Yaxley's words, William only responded with the simplest two words, bite me, expulso. A beam of light with a powerful impact shot towards William. He had already prepared and raised his wand and shouted the spell, Protego. A silver invisible barrier easily blocked Yaxley's spell. That's it. William threw a handful of buttons from his pocket, Verdo, and transformed them all into large hairy spiders with 8 eyes and sharp teeth. Thanks to the price of the Acromanthus and Diagon Alley, William now has a deep understanding of the Acromanthus rapid transformation. Even Professor McGonagall can hardly find any faults in the details. A large group of Acromanthus surrounded Yaxley. Tremo, Yaxley pointed his wand at the ground. Starting from his feet, a cone-shaped crack appeared on the ground, which trapped most of the Acromanthus that William had transformed into, turning them into wisps of black smoke. Serpensortia, he quickly waved his wand forward, and wisps of black smoke condensed into half-real and half-illusory snake shadows, sweeping towards William. These snake shadows were completely different from ordinary transfiguration creatures. When they were bitten by William's remaining 8-eyed giant spider, they actually passed through directly. Instead, the 8-eyed giant spider turned into black smoke and disappeared. Did it mag teach you? Transfiguration is not something you can use to duel just because you turn buttons into spiders, Yaxley said sarcastically. When he saw William trying to burn these snake shadows with flame burning, but it only made them bigger and more dangerous, he laughed even more happily. 3 runes appeared quietly. A barrier made of light appeared in front of William, turning into a golden wave. All the snake shadows swept by it dissipated like snow encountering flames. When faced with such bizarre means, the Patronus charm, which represents positive energy, and the rune word glory almost always work best. That's it, William repeated. Go down, I don't have that much time to waste on this flea, Yaxley suddenly said, and his entire tone and demeanor became completely different at this moment. But you are still a little weak, his tone suddenly changed back. Yaxley seemed reluctant to let him come out, but wanted to defeat William personally. Is he talking to Voldemort? But why are they going through so much trouble? They seem to be in the same brain, not like Quirrell, one head with 2 faces. William found this really puzzling. Stupid. Do you think a flea like this will consume a lot of my energy? The high-pitched and cold voice quickly took the lead, and he casually shook Yaxley's wand with a look of disgust on his face. William Buffalo Quirrell once told me about you. He mentioned that you might be the most suitable candidate, but you disappointed me at that time, Voldemort said calmly. I'm really sorry. William showed an expression that he didn't feel sorry at all. What he wanted to achieve, Voldemort could never give it to him. Quirrell is indeed wrong. I can see that you are a thorough Dumbledore's man. Like him, you also believe in something as illusory as love, Voldemort said with some disappointment, and he waved his wand quickly. Crucio, dark red lightning shot out from the top of his wand, and it came to him at a speed that William could not react in time. Fortunately, a silver light suddenly lit up, turning into a solid barrier, blocking the dark red lightning. The rune word Guardian took effect. The Cruciatus curse is so fast, William's mind was filled with shock. Although he could not use it, he had learned all 3 unforgivable curses. Whether it was the Cruciatus curse or Avada Kedavra, they were actually driven by very extreme emotions. To use a powerful Cruciatus curse, the wizard not only needed to have a huge amount of magic power, but also wanted to torture others from the bottom of his heart, wanting to make people suffer in despair. The dark wizards who were really good at the Cruciatus curse often experienced the most extreme pain themselves. Only by using such extreme emotions as fuel can the wizard's magic power be mobilized to the greatest extent. Most of the graduates of Ilvermorny could use the unforgivable curses, but only a very small number of them could make these unforgivable curses play their due role, instead of just making people bleed from the nose. Interesting, these ancient magic runes always give you surprises, don't they? Voldemort did not pursue the victory, but instead looked at the barrier in front of William with interest. He could see that this barrier was different from the armor, and it was actually the resonance of several runes that played its role. But you have only learned the surface of it. He shook his wand lightly, and a red light shot out. It was a barrier that did not actually have a strong attack power. Its direction was not even William, but it seemed that Voldemort threw it casually. The red light fell on the silver barrier, and with a crisp sound, the entire barrier was broken into pieces. At the same time, William also used his own spell, Confrango, Thunder Explosion, and the black and red light burst out from the top of his wand, but its target was not Voldemort, but the chess pieces on the other side of the room. William has clearly realized that if he wants to compete with Voldemort in magic, he will not have any good end. So the only choice left for William at this moment is to make this scene more chaotic. Only in chaos can the little tricks he has reserved have a better space to play. Fortunately, this room designed by Professor McGonagall is very simple. Dumbledore has only one purpose in removing all the black pieces: the challenger must defeat the white pieces head-on. With a loud boom, the chess pieces stood up one after another, holding weapons in hand, and rushed towards William and Voldemort. Arresto momentum, William quickly used the spell, then jumped up on the spot, pointing his wand at his feet. Expulso, the huge shock wave drove his body up and moved quickly to the other end of the room. The fastest White Knight had already rushed in front of Voldemort, with the 2 front hooves raised high, and the spear in his hand was about to poke down. Trouble, Voldemort waved his wand, a red light flashed, and blew its head and half of its body apart. There was a loud bang. The heavy horse fell to the ground. Voldemort suddenly frowned, pointed his wand at the other end of the room, and conjured up a translucent, almost solid air barrier. The next moment, a small bag gently hid it. With a huge explosion, the flames tore the entire barrier to pieces, and even Voldemort, who was standing behind the barrier, was swept into the smoke and dust. This thing is better than the unforgivable curse, William thought proudly, and at the same time, with the help of the disillusionment charm, he quietly changed his position. Damn fleas, Voldemort let out a high-pitched and sharp roar. When the smoke and dust dissipated, he was still standing there, but William's mercuric fulminate did not play any role. At this moment, Voldemort looked very embarrassed. The black wizard robe he had originally worn had disappeared, revealing the white shirt underneath, and the dark green Slytherin ribbon fell to the ground beside him. The bishop, who looked like he was carved out of white marble, and another chess piece approached Voldemort, but before they could raise their weapons, their heads were easily blown off and they fell to the ground. Do you expect them to save you? Voldemort waved his wand one after another, blowing up the heads of all the white chess pieces that surrounded him, whether they were chariots, bishops, or pawns. He was proud of his status, so he naturally wouldn't be like William, who cast a disillusionment charm on himself and quietly hid in the corner of the room. William wanted to repeat the sneak attack just now, but as soon as he threw out the small bag of mercuric fulminate, Voldemort waved his wand in his direction, throwing out a powerful shock wave. If William hadn't reacted quickly and put up the iron armor, I'm afraid he would have to taste a mercuric fulminate that was more effective than black magic today. Damn it, how can I fight this? William felt a little numb. It seemed that no matter where he went, even under the influence of the disillusionment charm, Voldemort could see William's position. But William also noticed that although Voldemort was using spells recklessly, except for the initial blow that shattered the upper body of the knight, the power of each spell did not seem to be very great. He seems to be afraid, William quickly came to a conclusion. The white chess pieces on the field have become fewer and fewer. Only the king and the queen are still attacking Voldemort under the cover of a bishop and several pawns. The king and the queen were under a spell and had a strong resistance to the spell. William finally quietly opened the door of this room and moved to the next room. Chapter 134 Counterattack. If there was a choice, William did not want to choose this method of skipping class and enter the next room in advance. William clearly remembered that in this room belonging to Quirinus Quirrell, the former Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, Quirrell perfunctorily let a giant monster in, but who knows what kind of tricks Quirrell will play here now. After passing through a long and narrow corridor, he pushed open the door of the next room. Unlike the bright room just now, this one is not only so big that you can't see the edge at a glance, but also looks dark, with only some wandering will-o'-the-wisps in the distance providing insignificant lighting. A layer of light gray mist always shrouds the place, and the air carries a faint mixture of soil, plants, and a fishy smell that cannot be distinguished. Is there even a river or a stream here? William guessed, and he heard the sound of gurgling water. This is a very suitable place for a sneak attack, but I don't know what effect this fog has. He stepped on the slightly wet land and walked forward cautiously. The tip of the wand in his hand was shining with a light that was hardly bright. The original will-o'-the-wisps that provided light here were not trustworthy. In Snape's class, William learned about this magical creature, the Syncpunks. They looked a little funny, like a clay figure that Hagrid casually needed, with a skull in the shape of a hat. Under their bodies, there was a ball of smoke that was always flashing a faint yellow light. Syncpunks often live in swamps and only appear at night. They don't have much wisdom, but they will instinctively lead the humans they find into the deepest swamps and drown them. Is this level trying to replicate a real adventure experience? This is a bit unlike Quirrell, but rather a bit like Lupin's style. William couldn't help but feel a little strange. He had already passed through half of the room, but hadn't encountered any obvious danger. Except for two colorful evil birds that noticed his figure, but before they opened their mouths, William, who reacted very quickly, cast a silence spell on them. But perhaps because William did not notice, a dark shadow was slowly expanding on the side of the muddy path. It had already enveloped William. A bright green light suddenly lit up in the darkness, followed by a high-pitched and cruel voice, Avada Kedavra. The green light sank straight into William's body. When did he? A thought just emerged in William's mind, but he suddenly found that the rune word Guardian turned into a silver barrier, blocking the green light, and William, who turned around, also saw the owner of the high-pitched voice. He was not the gloomy-faced, pointed, hook-nosed Dwight Yaxley, but the Voldemort in William's impression who used his nose to gain power. This is a bog art. William instantly realized its identity. This creature that can reflect the fear in the hearts of humans did read William's thoughts. He was indeed afraid that Voldemort would suddenly appear and use Avada Kedavra on him, But in his impression, Voldemort was always Voldemort, not Yaxley. Ridiculous, William shouted the spell quickly. A black 2-pin plug appeared out of thin air and pierced into the position that should have been his nostril, but now became the socket. The other end of the plug was connected to the back of Voldemort's head, making his forehead light up. The Boggart turned Voldemort even showed a very exaggerated, Jim Carrey-like big and bright smile. Fuck, William did not expect that his spell would have such an obvious effect. This is simply a world-famous painting, but he just wanted to laugh out loud, but he held it back. Laughter will disperse the figure of the Boggart, but the Boggart is also a good opportunity for William to take advantage of. He dared to swear that he was not a petty person. But for Merlin's sake, when the green light came on just now, William almost saw his parents in his previous life. Petrificus totalis, William waved his wand, making the Boggart's body stiff and rigid. William also conjured up many silver ropes, tied it tightly like a balloon, and then continued to move forward. Along this dark path, William soon approached the end of the room, and he also encountered several attacks during the period. But unlike most Hogwarts students who like to use various defensive techniques to deal with their threats, William, who was born in Ilvermorny, is more accustomed to using evil spells to deal with everything directly. So after encountering 2 unlucky red hats, a kind of dwarf who lives in various dark corners and likes to sneak attack passers-by with a big stick, and hanging them like kites, William has hardly encountered other magical creatures. At the end of the room, there is a very dilapidated and steep suspension bridge. There were 2 brightly burning torches at each end of the suspension bridge, providing stable lighting. A very tall giant monster was sitting at the other end of the suspension bridge, snoring loudly. It had a flavor of coral. This is the most suitable ambush site. William threw the unfortunate Boggart onto the suspension bridge, cast a very powerful sticking spell on it, making it impossible for it to move to other places, and then removed the petrification spell on it. As soon as the Boggart woke up, it quickly turned into a ball of black gas that was almost humanoid. It had a very tall body and a severely hunched back. It looked a bit awkward. This was the first time William saw the real body of the Boggart. This magical creature was often very cunning and hid in various dark corners. Almost no one knew what it looked like. I hope it can give Voldemort a surprise, William thought secretly. He had already cancelled a disillusionment charm on his body. The 2 unlucky red hats were also knocked unconscious by him. He also tied a few small bags of mercury fulminate salt mixture on their waists. This was almost all the stock he had. After carefully reviewing the duel with Voldemort just now, William found something strange. No matter how he changed his position under the disillusionment charm, Voldemort could find him instantly, and his seemingly random and weak spell easily defeated William's barrier that could originally resist an Auror-level wizard. If my guess is not wrong, William decided to take a little risk to verify his guess. He just tried to rub the gold coin to contact the house elf Lalo, but the gold coin did not respond. These rooms seemed to be enchanted and separated from the outside space. William didn't know whether the room was like this originally, or whether it was because he had exposed his ugly face of using house elves to travel too many times in front of an old bee, so Dumbledore secretly added restrictions. Anyway, no matter what, you will be deducted, quietly, Dumbledore's Christmas gift, which was originally considered abundant, could only be barely considered okay. After struggling for a while, the Boggart realized that it was impossible to escape from the suspension bridge, and was forced to hide in the shadow under the bridge. The black gas that was as big as Hagrid suddenly shrank into a small shadow like Professor Flitwick. Not long after, Yaxley's figure approached the suspension bridge. The tip of his wand was shining with a light brighter than a torch. He looked at the suspension bridge very carefully, trying to find some clues left by William. Unfortunately, Yaxley's attempt was doomed to be in vain. William always remembered to erase his footprints along the way. After confirming that there were no other threats here, Yaxley walked onto the suspension bridge. Oops, William suddenly thought that he had fallen into his own blind spot as a time traveler. He subconsciously thought that it was Voldemort, but the person controlling that body might not be him. Although Yaxley was annoying, he did not become the Students' Union president by virtue of his handsome smile, not to mention that he had never had that thing. Dealing with a mere Boggart was not a problem for him. William anxiously saw the shadow under the suspension bridge suddenly surge and turned into a black shadow. It turned into a wizard wearing a black wizard robe and lying on the ground. Due to the angle, William could not see his appearance clearly. Avada Kedavra, A bright green light lit up at this moment, illuminating almost the entire room. Perhaps driven by the violent emotional shock, the power of this Avada Kedavra curse was so great that it exploded into a ball of black smoke just after it touched the unfortunate Boggart. After casting this Avada Kedavra, even Voldemort would need a breath or two to buffer, but William had already seized the opportunity. He is still Voldemort, this thought came to William's mind, followed by excitement. He pointed his wand at the two unlucky red hats and waved it quickly, causing them to shoot straight at Voldemort like two cannonballs. What? Hearing a faint sound of breaking through the air, Voldemort turned his head to look at the source of the sound. He raised his wand and wanted to repel them, but the Avada Kedavra he had just cast under the intense emotional shock made him weak, and his reaction was slow for a moment. Boom! It was like an earthquake. The ground shook violently, making William unable to stand firmly and almost fell to the ground. 4 silver invisible barriers appeared at the same time, blocking the powerful shock wave generated by the explosion, and barely protected William's safety. Chapter 135 Avada Kedavra. As soon as he regained his balance, William desperately rolled forward. This action was of course extremely embarrassing, and as always neat robes were covered with mud and water, but a pale green light fell on his previous position almost the next moment. Voldemort leaped into the air, his upper body was covered with wounds of various sizes, the deepest of which was so deep that the bones could be seen, but not much blood flowed out, and his lower body was completely shrouded in black mist. At the moment of the explosion just now, he decisively gave up resisting, and chose to use black magic to transform himself into a ball of black mist that could move quickly, narrowly avoiding most of the power of the explosion. Buffalo, Voldemort was almost mad. Tonight was supposed to be his night. He cleverly delayed Dumbledore and easily obtained the Philosopher's Stone that was hidden tightly by that damn old man. He returned like lightning and announced his rule to the entire wizarding world. But what about now? He, the Dark Lord whose name the entire magic world dared not call out, was overwhelmed by the little tricks of this damn flea buffalo. And the fog in this room, Voldemort thought bitterly. After he walked into this room, he suddenly found that he was restricted in some way. Not only could he not return to the body of the young Yaxley boy, but the consumed magic power could not be restored naturally. It was as easy for a wizard to restore magic power as breathing, and because few people had ever used spells very intensively and squandered their magic power, many wizards did not even know about magic power. This was naturally not a big problem in normal times. Dealing with the problems in this room was as simple as raising a finger. But Buffalo actually got at Boggart from nowhere, and took advantage of the emotional excitement when he saw his own corpse to create this powerful explosion. In the moment just now, Voldemort almost thought he was going to die again. But fortunately, he was calm enough and figured out the most appropriate way to deal with it, although he didn't want to use this black magic that turned into black mist, because this black magic involving transfiguration would make his soul closer to this body when separating and combining the body. The relationship between the soul and the body is not as simple as a socket and a jack, but rather a bit like transparent tape and paper. When transparent tape is attached to a piece of paper, even if it is only temporary, and when they are separated, they are extremely careful, it is inevitable that they will be contaminated with something else, so it is no longer pure. What's more terrible is that this body itself has a sober, dominant, healthy and complete soul as its owner. Voldemort didn't know what changes this would bring, but he knew that on the eve of his resurrection, any unstable factors would not be a good thing. Fortunately, this flea won't live long. As long as I get the Philosopher's Stone, I can use the elixir of life to reshape my body and get rid of this embarrassing situation. Voldemort raised his wand and pointed it at William. His current state and remaining magic power were no longer suitable for activating the unforgivable curse, but this did not mean that Buffalo, a particularly troublesome flea, could stop the great Dark Lord. Voldemort saw that Buffalo had erected 2 layers of silver barriers and was trying to find a chance to escape. This made him feel a little funny. "Can't you see? The gap between us," he said softly, and waved the wand in his hand casually, shooting out a red light. This light just lightly touched a certain point of the barrier that William had erected, causing it to vibrate violently. How did Voldemort do it? William tried to hide his inner shock, activated the ring on his hand, and once again propped up an invisible barrier. At the same time, he waved the wand in his hand, shooting out a large number of icicles, which shot straight at Voldemort. Voldemort, who was serious, showed a suppression force that William could not match at all. He wanted to gain some breathing space by any means. But Voldemort seemed to have seen through William's thoughts. Not only did he not use magic to fight him, but he just raised his wand and easily deflected all the icicles shot by William to the other side. You think you have learned a little bit of ancient magic, and you use it as a support. You are so blind. Voldemort shot at a red light again, smashing William's barrier. William's other 2 rings lit up. He gave up the rune ward guardian and returned to armored body, but it still made no difference. Voldemort just waved his wand slightly to break them, like swinging a hammer and gently hitting a mirror. How did he do it? William felt completely incomprehensible. Obviously, in terms of strength, the absolute gap between him and Voldemort was not that big at the moment. In fact, because he mobilized mostly enchanted props, he even had a certain advantage in some aspects. But Voldemort relied on the barriers to ruthlessly break his defense. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. William knew that he must not retreat now, because the moment he showed his weakness to Voldemort, it would be the moment when Voldemort launched a fatal attack. But he didn't know what he should do to regain the advantage in the face of Voldemort's overwhelming dominance. Transfiguration? No. Spells? No. Damn it, many emergency plans he had conceived flashed through his mind, but they were often overturned by himself in an instant. After coming to this world, William had never felt so helpless. He clearly realized that those tricks were only suitable for opponents who were similar to himself or better than himself, not for opponents like Voldemort who had almost no weaknesses. William kept propping up the protective barrier with a ring, but it was constantly broken by Voldemort's unreasonable love. You are like this, and so is that old man Dumbledore, and the boy Harry Potter, and his crazy mother. I once thought of sparing her life, but she foolishly stood in front of me. Voldemort walked forward slowly. He saw almost everything he wanted to see on Buffalo's face: panic, hesitation, helplessness, even though the boy tried his best to cover it up, but all of this fell into his eyes. That Lily Potter, What? He laughed loudly, but suddenly felt that the wand in his hand slipped out of his hand uncontrollably. A bright red light suddenly appeared and fell on Voldemort. Expelliarmus, Expelliarmus, I don't allow you to say that about her. Harry Potter suddenly tore off his invisibility cloak and stood in front of William with his wand in hand. His face was pale and ugly, like those wizards who were tortured by burning. But in fact, it was true. Harry felt his scar burning with pain. He was indeed a little late. But now is the right time. Tonight was an especially difficult night for Harry, and his scar was aching. This torment did not improve even after he fell asleep, and Harry found himself in the nursery again. But tonight's dream was different. Harry did not see the figure of the terrifying man in black, nor did he see the woman, but the 2 quarreling voices kept echoing in his ears, and there seemed to be a very fierce conflict between them. The cold and high-pitched voice became particularly excited tonight, as if something he was expecting was about to happen. Damn old thing, the cold and high-pitched voice finally took the upper hand, and the voice of the man who claimed to be his ancestor who appeared later gradually weakened, but he did not walk into that good night without any resistance. Harry felt the pain of the scar on his forehead getting worse, but there was also a new influx of warmth, which made him feel refreshed. In a daze, he put on the invisibility cloak and quietly slipped out of the Gryffindor common room. Harry didn't know where he wanted to go, but a strange feeling drove him in a certain direction. Harry, who was only a first-year student, naturally didn't know that just like a moth will spontaneously fly towards a flame, a damaged soul will also want to return to wholeness again, and the soul of the same origin is the sweetest bait in its eyes. Harry came to the small corridor on the east side of the 4th floor, passed through the trapdoor on the ground, and walked through the devil's snare that had turned into a pile of ice. The severe pain from the scar affected his thinking, and it took Harry a long time to find the key to the next room. The headless bust scattered on the ground in the next room scared him sober. But Harry is a Gryffindor after all. A real Gryffindor. When he followed a strange feeling and came to the suspension bridge wearing the invisibility cloak, he saw the scene of Voldemort pressing William step by step. Although he was full of fear in his heart, when the man said Lily Potter, Harry still bravely drew his wand and used a spell Disarmus that Professor Lupin had taught in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class. For Merlin's sake, William saw Harry, who was like a heavenly soldier, and reacted quickly. He used his wand to conjure a rope and pulled Harry closer to him. At the same time, he used a silent spell and a wandless spell to slow down and cushion the shock, and with the help of the powerful shock wave brought by the flying sand and rocks, he quickly jumped to the other side of the suspension bridge. Damn it, He heard Voldemort's crazy scream, turned around, and saw his right hand pointing at him, and a green lightning shot out. Avada Kedavra, Voldemort shouted the spell unwillingly, and the pale green light caught up with William, who was still in the air like lightning. Chapter 136 Lego. Avada Kedavra, Voldemort shouted the spell unwillingly, and the green light caught up with William, who was still in the air like lightning. At this moment, in William's eyes, time seemed to have stopped. Countless past scenes, many possible or absurd countermeasures, and some familiar faces appeared in his mind. He briefly thought of using Harry to block this lightning, but William immediately gave up this idea. This lightning was too fast. William didn't expect Voldemort to be able to cast such a difficult, unforgivable curse as Avada Kedavra without a wand, and it was so accurate that he could aim at himself who was still in the air. He must hate me to death. Suddenly, this thought came to William. He watched the green light slowly but unstoppably fall on him. All the defenses he had prepared for himself were useless. The end of the book. William felt himself fall lightly to the ground. Everything around him was foggy. If you want to get out of this wild land, you should find another way. A familiar voice came to his ears. William looked in the direction of the voice. It was a young boy with short golden hair. He had delicate features and fair skin no matter how strict the standard was. He habitually had a smile on his lips. I didn't even know my voice sounded like this. He stood up and smiled at him. To be honest, I thought this would be a place like Charing Cross Station, and you should at least be an old man who looks very wise, preferably black, Indian or something. William said a joke that only a time traveler would know, but he thought the other party should be able to catch it. You are in the world of Harry Potter, and that is also Avada Kedavra, not a plane crash. Besides, where do you think this is? The other William smiled and pointed to the gray fog surrounding them. The fog was dissipating quickly, revealing a clear sky, and William found himself standing next to a cliff. Ilvermorny. William looked down along the high cliff. He saw a white castle built in the top of a mountain connected by a long bridge. Unlike Hogwarts, it was built entirely of white marble and looked elegant and graceful. This is the first time I've seen it on a sunny day, but it's not real, is it? Founded in the 17th century, Ilvermorny is located on the top of Mount Greylock. It is under a spell, and the castle will only appear when it is surrounded by clouds and mist. So, are you going to take me to the Eternal Kingdom, my Virgil? William, or more accurately Fenrir, lowered his head and saw the yellow skin on his hands. This is the color engraved in his soul. If you want to get out of this wild land, you should find another way. This sentence comes from Dante's Divine Comedy. Dante met his guide and mentor, the poet Virgil, in the wilderness, and Virgil said this to him. But how do you know that you are the Dante I'm waiting for? William smiled and walked down the mountain with Fenrir. They walked along a winding forest path. That ghost, Nick, who is almost headless, told me that you probably don't have any consciousness left. Fenrir suddenly thought of his previous conversation with the ghost of Gryffindor. Nick said that outside his soul, there was a shell that had been dead for a long time and would disappear at any time. He is right, but this is a very special place. It does not belong to the past, and there is no way to go back. All I can do now is to watch quietly and wait for the day when you become strong enough, William said lightly. This is a special space. Even magic can hardly explain its principles. William only knows that he has to witness Fenrir living a life that should belong to him here, even if it is not something he is willing to do. Now, Fenrir grasped the key words in his words. Ah, you found it? William clapped his hands slightly exaggeratedly and said, you don't really think that I have no resentment? In the past few years, when I could still do something, I always couldn't help thinking, if I had better luck at that time and could hold on a little longer, would you have no chance to appear? He lowered his head slightly, revealing a somewhat regretful expression. I really can't do anything here, and I can't change any of your ideas, but I can at least block you from reality in the past. That is naturally just a trivial change, but I believe you have discovered something, so it was you who was playing tricks. Fenrir naturally found it. In the past years, the loneliness and alienation he felt were not inexplicable. Fenrir has always found it difficult to feel joy from the heart or want to do something from the heart, so he had to drive himself desperately. At first, he thought it was a curse as a time traveler with memories of another life. Don't look at me with such a terrible look. I can't make you feel anything out of thin air. It's you who chose to close yourself off. Ah, we are almost there. The next scene, William suddenly said excitedly. A treehouse suddenly appeared in front of this quiet forest path, but when they walked into the door of the treehouse, Feng Rui found himself standing in a very wide venue. He was not alone. On the steps, all the seats were full of people, and they were all witnessing a grand ceremony being held in the center of the venue. An elderly teacher handed the graduation certificate to the student at the front of the line, and reached out to gently pull down the tassel in front of his bachelor's hat. Unfortunately, everyone's face was shrouded in a faint light, and even if Feng Rui tried hard to see, he could not see their specific appearance. Because you haven't been able to experience it yourself, this is just your imagination. But to be honest, when I first knew that the world I live in was actually just created in a novel, William introduced softly. Shocked, Feng Rui looked at himself, and suddenly a black bachelor's robe appeared there. It was black and the silk was very smooth. He had imagined what kind of scene he would see if he appeared in front of the mirror of Aries, which would reflect the things he most yearned for in his heart. This graduation ceremony, which he was destined not to experience in person, was one of them, but it was also the scene he feared the most. I'm angry, but I don't know who I should be angry at. To use a word you are more familiar with, it should be the so-called incompetent rage. William spoke in fluent Chinese. The team moved forward little by little. But when it was almost Feng Rui's turn, the crowd flickered slightly, and in 1 or 2 breaths, it had already dissipated, like a mirror flower and a moon in the water. The surroundings returned to the foggy state, but seemed to be recolored little by little. We don't have much time, William laughed softly, stretched out his hands, and pulled out 2 chairs from the air. They were exactly the same as the one in Dumbledore's office. He handed one of the chairs to Feng Rui and sat on the other one. What will happen next? Feng Rui sat next to him, quietly looking at the face he had used for more than 10 years from the side. You actually already know, don't you? This is Limbo, a place of exile where the dying souls temporarily live. Look, it even has a forest and a river. William spread his hands and said. Limbo is an area described by Dante in the Divine Comedy. It is outside the 9 hells, but it is not blessed by the holy light of heaven. The souls who stay here are invisible. Dante described it as a place dotted with green grass slopes and a beautiful river. But in the magical world, Limbo has become a real concept. Feng Rui remembered that in the original world, Harry Potter came to this space briefly after knowing his fate and taking the initiative to die. Do you remember the cruel question you asked to the bronze door knocker of Ravenclaw? Have you figured out your answer now? William suddenly asked. The ship of Theseus. This was originally a philosophical thought proposed by Plutarch. If the wood on Theseus' ship was gradually replaced until all the wood was not the original wood, would the ship still be the original ship? It is no longer the original ship. Feng Rui shook his head, but said firmly. It is no longer the era of ancient Greece. Later workers installed a keel for the planks of that ship. The keel is a longitudinal member connecting the bow column and the stern column in the center of the base of the hull. It is located at the bottom of the ship. There are transverse ribs on the top of the keel for reinforcement. The keel goes around the bow column at the bow and stern. It is usually the first part of the hull to be built, and it is also the part of a ship that can never be changed. No matter how other planks are replaced, the keel will never be changed. He is Feng Rui, and now he is also William. Really? Another William showed a somewhat forced smile. That's great. That's great. I should go down too. The fog was gradually getting heavier. His voice seemed to come from far away. Feng Rui lowered his head and saw that he had changed back into the Ravenclaw uniform, with a beautiful blue ribbon hanging on his chest, but his skin was still yellow. He raised his head and looked at William, only to see that he had been swallowed by the mist, and his face was covered with tear marks. Wake up. William, wake up. Harry's anxious shout rang in his ears. Chapter 137 The Perfect Stage. William woke up from the darkness. He saw that he and Harry were on a long corridor. The floor of the corridor was paved with marble tiles. There were torches on the walls on both sides at a distance to provide sufficient lighting. At the end of the corridor, there was a stone door. Its door was closed tightly, and the whole body was a deep black. There were many human figures with painful expressions carved on it, who seemed to be struggling desperately to escape from the door, or to catch anyone who approached the door. On the top of the door, there were scribbled words. From here, you can go directly to the city of misery. From here, you can go directly to endless suffering. From here, you can go directly to fallen beings. This must be Nicholas Flamel's idea. Only he would design the last level like this. Last Christmas, William gave Nicholas Flamel a gift of the Divine Comedy illustrated by Gustave Doré. Obviously, he used the idea of that book in this. The appearance of this door is exactly the same as the work of the French sculptor Rodin, The Gate of Hell. Of course, perhaps due to some strange plot, Nicholas Flamel did not fully express Dante's description in the Divine Comedy, but omitted the following paragraphs praising the merits of God. It's very wizard. How long have I been there? William stood up with the help of the wall and asked Harry, who was still a little restrained and confused. Not long. I saw a green light, and then we fell down, and the man suddenly fell down. I didn't know what to do, so I could only drag you all the way into this room, Harry recalled in some confusion. His left hand covered a scar on his forehead, which was still throbbing with pain. That person is coming. Who is he? What is that green light? Following the scar, Harry saw a figure in Slytherin robes waving a wand, lightly flying over the deep pit and landing on the other side. He is Dorothy Yaxley, the head of the student union, but now he is Voldemort, William answered casually. He held the wand and waved it gently. The tip of the wand made of blackthorn wood flickered with a faint light, as if responding to the call of its owner. William felt that the connection between him and the wand became closer. Blackthorn wood will produce the sweetest berries after experiencing the most unbearable frost. The wand made of this wood seems to need to go through danger or difficulties with the owner before it can become a true contract partner. Mr. Ollivander once introduced his wand to William in this way, but at that time he thought it was just a propaganda slogan. Voldemort? But Hagrid said that was the name of the Dark Devil? Hasn't he been defeated? Harry asked in surprise. Of course he had heard of this name. Voldemort was the murderer who killed his parents, the tall black figure he had seen countless times in his dreams. After all this is over, everything will have a reasonable explanation. William shook his head. Now was not the right time to explain to Harry. Voldemort might walk in from that door at any time, but he inexplicably didn't feel very nervous in his heart. William didn't know what the dream or travel just now was. Maybe it was really the original owner talking to the new owner again after more than 10 years of quitting the game, or maybe he was communicating with an imaginary self. But at this moment, William clearly felt different compared to a moment ago. This world has become more real. He casually activated the ring on his right index finger, activated the rune ward guard, and let it fully activate, unfolding into a silver barrier. William really noticed for the first time that this barrier was actually composed of 3 layers of barriers of different depths. The 3 runes overlapped, combined, and resonated with each other, and finally evolved into such a spell effect. But in the past, William only knew that they were arranged in this way, but he didn't know the principle of their effectiveness. It was precisely because of this that this seemingly powerful defense seemed extremely fragile in front of Voldemort. But what if it is arranged like this? William waved his wand and gently adjusted the distance and position between the runes, so that the 3 layers of barriers were arranged in a more natural and reasonable form, so that they no longer had obvious weak areas. He had a feeling that after the strange dream, his absolute magic power had indeed increased, but it would be a slow process. However, William felt that he was definitely not a match for himself a few minutes ago. Is the world in Voldemort's eyes like this? William guessed, and he took Harry to the depths of the corridor. The dark gate of hell seemed to sense their presence, and the painful figure on the door waved its hands unconsciously. A black flame suddenly ignited and blocked the huge black door. This place is the perfect venue for the last duel tonight. It is a perfect stage. When Voldemort pushed open the door of the corridor and stepped into the corridor, he saw 2 of the 3 people he hated most in this world at first sight. William stood in the middle of the corridor, holding his wand, quietly waiting for Voldemort's arrival, and Harry stood behind him, nervously holding his wand. Voldemort suppressed his inner turmoil. He watched the green light of Avada Kedavra fall on William. Only Buffalo should not be alive. No one stood in front of him to counteract the killing curse with the power of love. It seems that you are ready, Voldemort said in a calm tone, while looking around with a corner of his eyes. William's endless tricks brought him many surprises, so he had to be cautious. Don't look for it. There is nothing else hidden here. William noticed Voldemort's gaze. The small bag of mercuric fulminate on his body had been used up. The magic gold rings on both hands had also been damaged to a certain extent due to excessive magic power withdrawal in the previous confrontation with Voldemort. Other tricks were basically used up. But Voldemort's condition was not much better than his. Yaxley no longer looked like Yaxley. His face had changed significantly, as if he had aged by a dozen years in a short period of time. Voldemort no longer dared to hand over the control of his body, because he was worried that once his consciousness was temporarily silent, he would be completely trapped in this body. The Yaxley boy did have good talent and was loyal enough, but this was definitely not the result of Voldemort hiding in Hogwarts for so long and paying such a high price. In the conversation with Quirrell later, Voldemort learned a formula for creating a new body. With the help of the formula and the power of the elixir, he was confident that he could reach a realm that no one could imagine. That would go further than he had gone in the past. Before that, I still have 2 small stumbling blocks to solve. Voldemort raised his wand and pointed it forward. His condition was indeed no longer suitable for using any unforgivable curses, but this did not mean that this 4th-year boy and a 1st-year boy would be his opponent. The savior, Voldemort sneered in contempt, and quickly waved his wand. A dark red flame suddenly flashed, like a poisonous snake, approaching William quickly, but was blocked by the silver barrier in an instant. William quickly launched a counterattack. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 bright red lights were almost instantly emitted from the top of the Blackthorn wand and shot towards Voldemort. William didn't even shout out the spell, just an idea came to mind, and the spell was already shot out spontaneously. Humph, Voldemort snorted lightly. Facing William's counterattack, his wrist quickly raised, drawing a half-oval, and a poisonous snake made of black smoke suddenly jumped out from the top of his wand, opened its huge mouth, and swallowed all 4 lights. The poisonous snake was even extending its body rapidly and biting William. Bombarda Maxima, William whispered the spell, and the black snake that was about to approach him exploded into a cloud of smoke. At the same time, he swung his wand downwards and used the shield charm to erect a barrier. A ball of dark green liquid that was almost purple was blocked by the shield charm barrier and fell to the ground, making a sizzling sound. It's Voldemort indeed. Even in an opposing position, William had to admire it. The dominance shown by Voldemort was incomparable to that of a wizard who had just been in contact for a few years. After just a few rounds, he was once again forced to defend. This damn flea, Voldemort was no less shocked than William. He resisted the Avada Kedavra that should have been fatal, and after only a short interval, the level of spells he showed amazing progress again. Between himself and magic masters like Dumbledore, what Buffalo lacked now was only time to settle. This young buffalo must have seen it. He must die. A sense of urgency forced Voldemort to swing his wand even harder, wanting to kill William, the future threat, right here. It's time to fight back. William also made up his mind. After coming to the wizarding world, this was the first time he suffered such a loss, being suppressed and unable to fight back, but fortunately he had returned to his rhythm now. As a traverser with full map cheats, he had a huge advantage. William activated the 4 rings in his hands at the same time, using guardianship to prop up a thick barrier. He was almost unreservedly squeezing the magic power and the magic gold to strengthen the defense of the barrier, and there were even visible cracks on the surface of the rings. But William no longer needed them. He waved his wand and cast a spell. Petrificus Totalis, Petrification. Chapter 138. So the last time doesn't count. Petrificus Totalis, William waved his wand, and a cluster of grey light shot out from the top of the Blackthorn wand. Petrification is a curse with little offensive effect. Its only effect is to make the person who is under this spell stiffen and unable to move, and become like stone. But William didn't expect to defeat Voldemort with a spell, because his wand was pointing at Harry Potter beside him. With Harry's confused expression, his body quickly became stiff, and William's body was wrapped in a faint silver light. The rune word strengthen worked. William only felt that he had endless strength at this moment. He easily grabbed Harry, and at the same time did not forget to cast a quick revival on himself, and then charged towards Voldemort with a shield. Harry, the special weapon against Voldemort, Potter. So, after Voldemort used a powerful spell to completely shatter the barrier held up by William, who rushed in front of him at an astonishing speed, swung Harry hard. In order to ensure the effect, William specifically grabbed Harry's legs this time, so that Harry's forehead hit Voldemort's face, which still looked uncomfortable. Ah, Voldemort screamed in pain. I think so too. Such a strong protective spell like Harry's mother's does not have to be limited to the hands. The forehead should be more effective. William launched a pursuit without hesitation. What is the blazing sword and what is the real damage? Damn it, Voldemort tried to be energetic and wanted to wave his wand, but was slapped in the face by William and Harry. He was already going crazy because of this burning pain. This pain was not directly generated from his own soul, but was transmitted along Yaxley's soul, but this did not relieve him from the slightest burden. After several tortures by William, the boundary between him and this body has become extremely blurred. Damn Buffalo, Voldemort staggered again by William, and raised his wand again, trying to use a silent spell. But William, whose body was in a strengthened state, had already seen through his thoughts, and only needed to gently knock Voldemort's wrist with Harry to interrupt his spell. Within 7 steps, the wand is fast. But within 7 steps, Harry is accurate and fast. Voldemort, who has filled up the dark magic talent tree, looked extremely aggrieved in front of William, who was transformed into a barbarian. He had to parry and dodge awkwardly, but Voldemort's movement seemed to be in slow motion in William's eyes. Hey, William caught a cold and kicked Voldemort's leg hard, causing him to fall to the ground in embarrassment. He lifted Harry and put his face tightly against Voldemort's face, looking like a pair of intimate lovers. But one of them had a stiff expression, like a stone, with only a hint of deep fear in his hollow eyes. The other one was desperately shrinking his head back, fearing that any touch of Harry's skin would touch him, but William was desperately pushing Harry's face towards Voldemort's, as if he had encountered a stain that was difficult to remove while mopping the floor. Let go. Bastard! Voldemort's high-pitched screams of pain echoed in the corridor. His voice was so tragic that the human figure on the gate of hell, who was suffering endless torment, could not help but shrink back and stop moving. Wherever Harry's skin touched, it became charred as if it was burned by fire. But before the wound bled, it had already turned into black smoke, and the blood slowly flowed from his cheek to the ground like fine sand. He was going crazy. Every nerve and every thought urged Voldemort to leave this body that would lead him to destruction, but the frequent use of the unforgivable curse and even the use of black magic to change his body had made the connection between his soul and this body become tight, and it was not something that could be separated in a hurry. Instead, Harry showed a painful smile at the corner of his mouth. The effect of total petrification that William had cast on him was fading little by little, and his ability to move began to recover. The lightning-shaped scar on his forehead also felt like it was on fire, but he slowly stretched out his hands and stroked Voldemort's cheek like a lover who was as close as he could be. You didn't give her a chance either, did you? Harry opened his mouth with difficulty. His words made Voldemort's eyes reveal fear for the first time, although it was only a trace. On that rainy night, he killed Harry's parents with his own hands, but when he wanted to kill Harry, he encountered the biggest failure of his life and had to wander in the forests of Albania for 10 years like a ghost. William Buffalo could only hurt him, but Harry had already hurt him once. I have to leave here, this thought flashed through Voldemort's mind. No matter what. At any cost. Once the desire to escape was born, it was like a wildfire that could never be extinguished. Voldemort tried his best to sever the connection between himself and this body, even leaving behind some precious parts. Don't go. He suddenly changed to another voice. Yaxley, who had been confused by the pain, actually took back the control of his body for a short time, and he wanted to keep Voldemort in his body forever. He sensed Voldemort's desire to sever the connection between him, and was unwilling to be abandoned by his master. If even Voldemort could not stop William and Harry, how could he do this? But he didn't know that it was precisely because of the connection between Voldemort and him that he fell into such a desperate situation. This was an extremely tragic contest. The 4 people present were doing their best. I don't know how long it took, it seemed like only a moment, but it also seemed like a long time had passed. A cloud of black smoke finally slowly emerged from the top of Yaxley's head. It circled upwards, as if it wanted to find a gap that could be used to leave this corridor. Yaxley had completely lost consciousness. His entire face had turned into black dust, and the pale bones underneath could already be seen. Harry was no better than him. In order not to loosen his hands, he had been biting his lower lip fiercely. The corners of his mouth were stained with blood, and he looked like a vampire. Only William. After Harry regained consciousness and knew what he should do, he had eliminated the effect of strengthening. Even though he had learned from the past, he cast a spell on himself in advance this time, which to a certain extent slowed down the side effects of the strengthening of the rune word. But its effect was too strong, and the enemy he faced was the powerful Voldemort, so William did not dare to hold back at all. William also collapsed to the ground, feeling the exhaustion as if his body was drained out, and every muscle was warning him. But William still reluctantly raised his wand and released a silver light net like he did with John D. The light net slowly drifted over, but unfortunately the angle was a little off, and it did not completely cover the black mist that Voldemort had transformed into, but only intercepted part of it. Although he still wanted to stop Voldemort, William really didn't have any extra strength. He could only watch it break off the part that was clamped by the light net and quickly disappear into the corridor. This is really embarrassing. William's wand fell to the ground. By the way, I have to notify someone quickly. He reached into his arms, trying to find the coin used to contact the house elf Lalo, but a deep sleepiness had already swept over him, like an unstoppable tide. Although I'm a pig if I use this thing again, a person can't step into the same river twice in his life, so the last time doesn't count. By the way, Nicholas Flamel before falling asleep, such an inexplicable thought suddenly appeared in William's mind. William dreamed of that dark world again. But this time, he could see clearly. Where is this? William asked subconsciously. He saw that he was not in an egg or an egg as he had imagined, but in a bubble with gorgeous colors and faint fluorescence. The light he saw in his previous dream did not come from the outside world, but was precisely reflected from his own bubble. Through the transparent bubble, he saw a dark world outside. No, there are other lights here, William quickly denied his thoughts. In this dark and huge world, he also saw other sparse lights, but most of them seemed very dim, like rice grains, slowly floating with a certain rhythm. It was a wonderful feeling. William felt that he no longer had a body, but his consciousness had become an extension of himself. In this dark world, a strange sound echoed. It was extremely magnificent. When William concentrated his attention and tried to listen, he seemed to understand something, but it seemed to be just the ravings of a madman without any information. In his daze, he heard a woman's voice that was obviously suppressing her anger. For Merlin's sake. This isn't Hogwarts. How could they be so badly injured? Professor Dumbledore, you must give me an explanation, otherwise I will definitely write to the Ministry of Magic. Poppy, I am as anxious as you, but the key for us now is to let them recover, Dumbledore said calmly. The condition of these two boys is not serious. I have prepared potions for them. After drinking them and resting for a day or two, they will be fine. But for those two boys, I am worried that their condition is no longer something I can deal with, Madame Pomfrey said worriedly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 139. This is not over yet. We have to think of a way. William heard the footsteps gradually fade away. After a while, he smelled a familiar and reassuring aroma. William struggled to open his eyes, but deep sleepiness had already surged up. Following the rhythm of this dark world, he slowly fell asleep. When William woke up again, it was already daybreak. The bright and somewhat dazzling sunlight shone in from the window, forcing him, who was still somewhat immersed in sleep, to give up resistance and open his eyes. Is this in the medical room? William quickly realized where he was. His two sides were separated by brown curtains. A pungent incense, mixed with the smell of potions and disinfectants, lingered in the medical room. This smell was actually not bad, but it was definitely not the reassuring smell he smelled before he fell asleep. He sat up and found that under him was a common hospital nursing bed, covered with snow-white sheets and mattresses. Oh, you're awake. For Merlin's sake, the curtain beside William was pulled open, and a very gentle female voice said. The speaker was a short and fat woman with a washed white square towel wrapped around her head and a tray in her hand. The tray was a very rich breakfast. Sorry, child, these are not prepared for you. I will ask the house elf to bring you another one. Noticing William's gaze, Madame Pomfrey shook her head. William? Madame Pomfrey, is William awake too? Harry's voice came from behind the curtain beside him. With a whoosh, the curtain was pulled open very hard. Harry used such great strength that William was a little worried that he would tear the curtain off directly. It looks like you've recovered well. William watched as Madame Pomfrey shoved the breakfast tray into Harry's hands unhappily and patted his arm a little harder. This is the infirmary, not the Quidditch field. Professor Dumbledore said that if you wake up, you should notify him immediately. But I think you still have time to chat on my way to his office. Madame Pomfrey smiled gently, walked out of the infirmary, and closed the door for them. When you told me that we must work together to defeat Voldemort, you didn't say this way. Harry looked at William with some complaints. I'm sorry, William apologized in a not-so-sincere manner. How long have I slept? Voldemort, I mean, what happened to Yaxley later? His question successfully diverted Harry's attention. It's the second day now. I woke up earlier than you yesterday afternoon. Yaxley's condition was very bad. Even that annoying Snape couldn't cure the burns on his face. Professor Dumbledore had to put him into a dreamless sleep and transferred him to St. Mungo's Hospital, Harry said with a complicated expression. Professor Dumbledore told me a lot of things. About my parents, and Voldemort. I can't even imagine what would have happened if you hadn't shown up that night. I think I have to thank you, he said very sincerely. After waking up, he immediately described to Dumbledore, who had not slept all night, what happened in the corridor on the 4th floor that night. For some reasons, Harry seemed a little vague when talking about how William defeated Yaxley. He only mentioned that when he touched Voldemort's exposed skin, it would burn. Dumbledore also answered many of his questions, including the cause of death of his parents, Voldemort's identity, and the fate that one of them was destined to die. Just overnight, Harry, who had experienced so much, felt that he had grown up a lot. You knew long ago that he was actually Voldemort, right? You also know my mother, Harry asked this question hesitantly. It had been bothering him all day. It's not hard to guess. You know, the winner of the Special Contribution Award 50 years ago was Tom Riddle, and his contribution was to discover the heir of Slytherin. We know the truth about the Chamber of Secrets. As for your previous contact with him, I don't know the specific experience, but I also have some guesses, William answered patiently. This is all about deducing the process from the result, which of course sounds very reasonable. Knock, knock, knock. The door of the infirmary was suddenly knocked, and Dumbledore with a head full of silver hair walked in. A brown ball jumped from his shoulder like a hurricane and fell heavily on William's bed. Gabe rubbed William's hand with his wet nose, and bit him gently at the same time, as if he was concerned, but also as if he was complaining. Professor McGonagall told me that if this little guy doesn't see you today, he will almost chew the sofa in her office until only 2 legs are left, Dumbledore said with a smile. William rubbed his little head vigorously, but he slapped it away with his paw in dissatisfaction. Harry, I think you will be happy to know that the Quidditch House Cup will be resumed soon, and the first training of the Gryffindor House team will be held in about half an hour. Dumbledore glanced at the wall clock. Half an hour later, the White Wizard blinked. Harry put on his robes excitedly, said hello to William and Dumbledore, and ran downstairs. Except for the severe pain in his scar and the heavy psychological shadow of total petrification, he was not actually injured. Dumbledore watched him leave, then sat down gently beside William's bed inside. To be honest, I don't even know how to thank you, William, he said very sincerely. I almost made a big mistake. Dumbledore misjudged Voldemort's arrangements, thinking that he only made arrangements in the Forbidden Forest, but he didn't expect that his enemy was not just his old friend Tom Riddle. If it weren't for William, not only would all the centaurs in the Forbidden Forest be slaughtered, but Voldemort would also easily take the Philosopher's Stone and make a comeback. He recounted what happened in the Chamber of Secrets. I spent too much time trying to calm his memory, only to realize that it was just a futile struggle, but after figuring this out, dealing with this magic became simple. I only need to separate and preserve the memories that originally belonged to Flint, and when the other memories that did not belong to him and were forcibly implanted into his mind expand to the limit, the elimination will begin automatically. This is actually not a simple matter. So there is still a chance for Marcus' memory to be restored? William asked a question. Yes, but he may have to rest for a year or two, and during this period he will need someone to take care of his life all the time. Old Flint came to Hogwarts in a rage and asked me to hand over the murderer. Fortunately, Yaxley is still alive, and although his memory is a little confused, it is still intact, Dumbledore said softly with a solemn face. Voldemort had brought too much harm to Hogwarts. Quirrell Squirrel, Draco Malfoy, Marcus Flint, and White Yaxley had all become his victims, and he was so close to success. I extracted a part of Yaxley's memory and shared it with Old Flint, Yaxley, and Lucius Malfoy. Their expressions at that time were very interesting. It's a pity that you didn't see it with your own eyes, of course. Lucius Malfoy almost threw away the pretentious cane on the spot, rolled up his sleeves, and had a real duel with the livid Old Flint. Yaxley was obviously unwilling, but he had to say that this was all his son's own wrong decision, a personal behavior, and had nothing to do with the decision of the Yaxley family. This matter is not over. Absolutely not. Lucius gave Flint a vicious look when he left the castle. He was obviously still upset that Marcus Flint chose his son as the target of the basilisk. If Voldemort returns again, there may be some problems among his old team. So how will this matter end? William asked with some confusion. Lucius Malfoy made a suggestion. He will use the influence of the Malfoy family to apply for the Order of Merlin for you and Harry, and will also withdraw from the school board with the Flint family and the Yaxley family. But this incident will be announced as a conspiracy of unidentified dark wizards, and their surnames will not appear in the Daily Prophet. Dumbledore looked at William. William, I will respect your opinion. In this matter, only you are truly qualified to make a decision, whether you choose to make it public or keep it low-key. It is not necessary to make it public. William didn't want to cause panic in the British wizarding world. As a time traveler, he knew that these wizards were too stupid. Even if the whole society knew that Voldemort had returned, nothing could be done. But if we handle it in a low-key manner, he was a little unwilling. The Malfoy family was fine, but Marcus Flint and Yaxley had caused him so much trouble. It was not William's style not to retaliate fiercely to make them realize that the sky was high and the sea was vast. I have an idea. William touched Gabe's furry head. He had narrowed his eyes, and seemed to feel that this would make him look too faceless, so he symbolically stretched out his claws and placed them on William's hand. Ho-ha, I will convey your opinion to Lucius Malfoy. Hearing William's idea, Dumbledore laughed. But is there anything I can do for you? As a token of my gratitude to you, well, Professor, I don't know if you have heard of the concept of brand ambassador and commercial advertising videos. Thinking of his own gray matter, William decided to make use of this rare opportunity. Chapter 140 Completion. Brand image spokesperson? Do you mean like Eleanor Lockhart? But you have to know that in many occasions, my identity is not suitable for me to personally do promotional activities for you. Dumbledore frowned slightly. In addition to being the headmaster of Hogwarts, he is also the chairman of the International Confederation of Wizards and the chief wizard of the Wizengamot. He also has an extraordinary reputation in the international community. Naturally, he can't be like Lockhart, the peacock, who keeps touting his own book. Professor, I don't want you to do that either. Don't you still have a few days before you officially announce this? Maybe I can work out a suitable plan first and then discuss it with you, as I did before. William proposed a plan. In the wizarding world, Albus Dumbledore's influence is like Jack Ma in modern society. When has anyone seen Jack Ma standing in a store shouting that a certain product is effective? All William needed was for Dumbledore to mention it casually during an interview. Then he would naturally ask the reporter to arrange a suitable setting, insert an advertisement with a very obvious presence, and then use the convenient and fast transportation means of wizards to flood the entire market with the cost-effectiveness of the product in a very short time. After defeating Voldemort this time, he has already obtained a very suitable buffer period, and now it is time to reap the rewards. Why not? Dumbledore nodded and agreed. And this incident, I think maybe we can use it as a theme to shoot a documentary as video material? Of course, I mean after we have dealt with some relevant details. William took the opportunity to raise another question. The relevant details naturally refer to the identity of the villain. It can be Yaxley, or Flint, or even an unknown or famous dark wizard, but it all depends on the sincerity of their two families and the Malfoy family. Documentary? You mean the movie? Nico hides it like a treasure. He has mentioned it many times, but he is unwilling to take me to see it. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows. He has actually seen the movie. It was during the summer vacation this year. After visiting the reclusive Nicholas Flamel and his wife, Dumbledore naturally became curious about movies and went into a Muggle movie theater. He remembered that he watched a movie called Terminator 2. To be honest, it was not a particularly pleasant experience because he really couldn't understand many of the things the actors were saying. But the experience of watching this movie itself gave Dumbledore a deep shock. Dumbledore realized that, as Heisenberg said, wizards' understanding of ordinary people has indeed produced a huge and expanding deviation. Although the quality of the Muggle studies offered by Hogwarts has been significantly improved in the past due to Quirrell's efforts, it is actually still a long way from the lives of ordinary people. It is far from being real, let alone useful. This is actually a very dangerous signal. Yes, just like a movie, but we will use the wizard's method and record it ourselves. William affirmed Dumbledore's idea. But I heard that recording and showing movies is a very complicated process. Even Nico can't figure out the ins and outs of those things. Dumbledore seemed a little hesitant. He could see that this was a good opportunity. But because this opportunity was too good, he was a little hesitant. If the movie was just a very confusing thing, like the pantomime Fountain of Fortune many years ago, it would be a disaster. Thanks to Sylvanus's fire ash snake, the school hospital was overcrowded at the time. The pungent smell of burning in the auditorium took several months to gradually dissipate, and the head of the director, Professor Billy, took even longer to finally return to normal proportions. Professor Dumbledore, the filming of a movie is actually much simpler than you think, and we can also use spells and transfiguration to get around the parts that are very difficult for ordinary people, William explained patiently. After having magic gold, he has mastered the method of moving electrical appliances and equipment into Hogwarts. The script will not be a problem either. There are naturally a lot of screenwriters in Hollywood willing to serve Mr. Franklin. As for the supporting aspects such as special effects, even the most outstanding props and stunt teams have to curse fuck when compared with spells and transfiguration. William has reason to believe that the best way to pry open the minds of these wizards who are still living 200 years ago is to slowly infiltrate their heads with a lot of private goods. But he had consulted Mr. Weasley about the introduction of movies or television, and the result was, although the Ministry of Magic did not explicitly prohibit it, it strongly advised wizards not to do similar things, especially if they still wanted to show movies publicly. The reason given by the Ministry of Magic was that this would bring about a bad atmosphere and may endanger the implementation of the Wizarding Statute, so this is definitely not the real reason why the Ministry of Magic hindered the introduction of movies. However, this incident is different and can become a good window. First of all, it is a real story that can be broadcast to the public in the form of a documentary. Secondly, it involves many secret stories, whether it is the secret room left by Slytherin, the Dark Wizards hundreds of years ago, or even the Savior Star as the protagonist. It is enough to attract the attention of those bored wizards. The most crucial thing is that in this incident, the pure-blood nobles who should have been the biggest obstacle to the promotion of movies and television will also stand on William's side. Doesn't the Malfoy family want to clear the suspicion that they are not pure enough? The Flint family and the Axley family are also willing to pay some price in exchange for Dumbledore's forgiveness. Since you are confident about this matter, I will cooperate with you, Dumbledore finally nodded. The small corridor on the east side of the 4th floor has been sealed by me temporarily. When you are ready, go and challenge the last level. I think even Nicholas Flamel will be proud of you after knowing your performance. He took out a bronze key from his pocket and handed it to William. But I think his more likely reaction will be to laugh at me desperately for making myself so embarrassed. William carefully put the bronze key into his pocket. That does sound like something he would do, Dumbledore nodded. Well, I think I, an old man, have taken up too much of your time. If I don't find some reason to leave, I'm afraid my ears will burn. He smiled, and his words seemed to have a certain meaning. Goodbye, William. Dumbledore stretched out his skinny right hand to William. Goodbye, Professor. William held Dumbledore's right hand. Dumbledore stood up and pushed open the door of the infirmary, and soon disappeared at the end of the corridor. Several heads quietly appeared in the window on the door of the infirmary. After confirming that Madame Pomfrey was not here, the door of the infirmary was opened forcefully. Penelope rushed to William almost like a gust of wind, her face flushed, and she stretched out her hands, as if to hug William. The Weasley brothers followed behind her, winking at William desperately. William soon found that Penelope's hands were like lightning, grabbing his right arm and twisting it hard. He couldn't help but take a breath of cold air in pain. Penelope was really ruthless and didn't save any strength. I thought your prophecy had expired yesterday. William showed a bitter smile, but did not struggle. Instead, he let Penelope continue to pinch him hard. She looked as strong as ever, but William could feel that Penelope's strength was also decreasing. Oh, maybe my prediction was wrong. Penelope glanced at William unhappily, retracted her hand that was pinching his arm, and looked him up and down carefully, as if she wanted to make sure that he didn't lose his arms and legs due to an accident. William smelled the fragrance that made him feel at ease again. He realized that the fragrance came from Penelope's hair. She used the collector's edition shampoo developed by William himself. Some time ago, William referred to Gilderoy Lockhart's ideas and added a small amount of bird snake egg yolk, valerian and ghost face vine. These two ingredients can not only neutralize the irritation of bird snake eggs, so that wizards will not face the dilemma of hair loss like Lockhart, but also add a pleasant fragrance to shampoo. However, because bird snake eggs are too expensive, and the production of this shampoo requires him to make it himself, William gave up this product line after making a small number of samples. You came to see me yesterday, William asked subconsciously. What? You listen. Were you awake at that time? Penelope said in surprise. She raised her eyebrows, but turned her face slightly to the side without leaving any trace, as if pretending that she was actually observing a stain on the curtain. I just have a guess. William hesitated for a moment, but still didn't dare to say that he seemed to smell the fragrance of her hair in his dream, which would make him sound a little strange. Hearing William's answer, Penelope also breathed a sigh of relief and finally turned her eyes back to William. Cough, cough, if you don't mind. Fred made a very exaggerated cough. We want to interrupt with a message. George also squeezed over, his face equally excited. Our underground base outside the school will be completed today. I think you definitely don't want to miss this scene, and come and give it a nice name. I'm a little stuck. The next chapter will probably be a little later. Chapter 141. Finished. So fast. Hearing the words of the Weasley brothers, William felt genuinely incredible. He had only rested for a few days, not for a few months. He had checked the progress of the project there last week. Although Weasley, and the house elves had always maintained a high efficiency, they spent too much energy in catching and feeding the basilisk in the middle of the process, which delayed a lot of progress. Yes, we got a lot of unexpected help yesterday, Fred said happily. But it's actually your credit, George added. The two of them quickly explained to William the reason why the project had made such rapid progress. Compared to William, who slept for an extra day, Harry woke up earlier. He described to them the story that happened in the small corridor on the east side of the 4th floor, and how William saved his life and defeated the Dark Wizard. You know, all of us want to do something for you. At this time, Penelope suddenly thought of this project that you have always cared about. Fred's words made Penelope turn her head away again. So we propose that we get everyone together and finish it before you wake up. George nodded proudly. We mobilized a lot of people, not only Percy, Lee Jordan, Angelina and others, but also almost half of the Gryffindor students, and some Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff students. But our own brother, the spoilsport Percy, secretly went to tell Professor McGonagall and wanted her special approval for us to do this. Fred scratched his head. To be honest, he thought that this thing was going to fail. Professor McGonagall, who was known for her strict style, would definitely not allow so many students to stay outside the castle until late at night, and they would continue to use explosive magic. Then Professor McGonagall also came, and she brought Professor Flitwick and Professor Sprout with her. And for some reason, even that annoying Big Bat Snape came in person, and brought some senior students who took his class. George completed his words. Professor McGonagall would not allow students to stay outside the castle alone until late at night, but if the deans of their 4 colleges were there, this could be treated as another situation. After that, things were not that complicated. Several professors joined forces to almost turn this project into an extracurricular expansion, and took the participating students to practice various spells. Professor Sprout even moved many pots of plants from her greenhouse. Once they touched the soil, the roots would grow wildly, and once heated, the roots would shrink back quickly. With such a simple back and forth, many holes appeared in the originally very hard soil, which could be easily blown up by them. So we can happily announce that it has been completed, Fred and George said in harmony. You can go over any time, but we still hope that you can wait until the afternoon. We don't want to miss such a precious moment, but we don't want wood to stuff our heads into the quaffle. Fred pretended to look pitiful and looked at William, and even squeezed out 1 or 2 tears. Wood must be wondering now, where are his trusted beaters who have not slept all night when they resume their first training after such a long time? George nodded desperately in response. William thought of what Dumbledore said to Harry when he first came. It seemed that it was just the time for the Gryffindor team to train. But the 2 Wheeleyes came to see him secretly first. Hurry up, you two. I promise you that I will wait until you are free in the evening before going over there. He urged the Weasley brothers to leave, watching them squeeze out of the infirmary and run towards the Quidditch field. After Fred and George left, the infirmary finally returned to a somewhat awkward silence. William recalled the unfinished conversation he had with Penelope. She had dark brown hair that was almost brown, and her beautiful face looked very delicate, and her natural features looked just right. What are you thinking about? Penelope suddenly said. I was thinking, William said, suddenly feeling a little embarrassed. It's a pity that you have to go to class this morning, otherwise maybe you would be interested in going to Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets with me. He thought of the agreement he made with Penelope a few days ago. No class this morning, Penelope shook her head and said, "But Professor Flitwick's spells." William remembered very clearly that Ravenclaw had Professor Flitwick's spells class this morning, and Professor McGonagall's transfiguration class in the afternoon, but Penelope's bright eyes interrupted him. "No class this morning," Penelope emphasized and repeated. "Okay, let me leave a note for Madame Pomfrey first." William drove Penelope, who showed a hint of curiosity on her face, to the other side of the curtain, changed into a wizard robe with a sky blue Ravenclaw ribbon, and after leaving a note for Madame Pomfrey in the infirmary, he took Penelope to the old girl's bathroom on the second floor of the castle. "Lucky, Moaning Myrtle isn't here right now, let's go in." William tiptoed to the door, and after making sure that the ghost who almost always lived in this bathroom was gone, he led Penelope in. "I didn't know you were so familiar with this place," Penelope chuckled and teased William. "This is a real girl's bathroom, although almost all the girls in the castle also know that they should not come here unless they have to." "I've never been here alone," William argued, and saw a strange smile on Penelope's face. He soon realized that this made him look even more outrageous than clearing his suspicion. "Ahem, come here, look here. Just speak to this faucet in Parseltongue, and the entrance to the secret room will open." He waved to Penelope, trying to change the subject. "Then do you speak Parseltongue?" Penelope asked in confusion. "Of course not, I'm not the heir of Slytherin. Just because I can't speak Parseltongue doesn't mean we can't open the Chamber of Secrets." William took out his wand, stepped back from the dragon head with a small snake pattern, and placed a blackthorn wand on the floor tile. The tip of the wand emitted a faint light. All the floor tiles touched by this light faded, cracked, and finally turned into powder. Through transfiguration, William took less than a minute to open another passage to the entrance of the Chamber of Secrets. The Gaunt family spent too much effort on protecting the dragon head as the entrance, but forgot that they were not isolated. Or maybe they actually noticed it, but they were too arrogant and didn't believe that someone would find and open Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets in this way. "Ladies first." William took out 2 raincoats from the shoulder bag he retrieved and handed one to Penelope. "I just realized that this chapter was swallowed and the title still has nearly 200 words. Sorry." Chapter 142 The Magician and His Assistant. Underground of Hogwarts. I don't know why Professor Sprout was unhappy these 2 days. I heard from Hufflepuff students that she moved a lot of plants to the common room of the college. But Snape has changed. He almost never deducts points in class. Penelope described what happened in the castle during the days when William was bedridden. Her words made William feel a chill down his spine. "Those devil snares were destroyed by Tom Riddle." "Yes, it was all done by Voldemort. I have nothing to do with it," William muttered in his heart. In order to get rid of the devil snares, he had to use the rune word Glacier, causing irreparable serious damage to them. The devil snare is a rare and precious magical plant, and it will undoubtedly take a huge amount of energy to grow the devil snare to such a large clump. Go down from the platform in front, and we will arrive at the Chamber of Secrets left by Salazar Slytherin. Walking beside Penelope, William held up his wand and carefully introduced the process of exploring the Chamber of Secrets with Dumbledore and Harry that day. "I always thought there should be a door or something at the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets." "Didn't you say that the entrance to the bathroom was actually built by the descendants of Slytherin, the Gaunt family, to hide the location of the Chamber of Secrets?" Penelope asked with some doubt. The not-so-bright light on the top of the wand well concealed William's embarrassment. There was naturally a door here, but later he felt that the door, which had a certain intelligence and would not be asked for by the victim himself, was very valuable for research, so he moved the wall away. It was not a very difficult process. Although Salazar Slytherin cast a heavy protective spell on the very thick metal door, William just asked the house elves to work together to cut off the wall that sealed the door along the perimeter, and easily brought it back to the underground factory. "You will have a chance to see it." William was vague and fooled. They walked up to the small square platform. Only standing here could they look directly into the eyes of the incomparable Slytherin statue. "He is arrogant, isn't he? He is the only one among the 4 giants who left such a magnificent statue," William said with emotion. "But I think Salazar Slytherin must have felt very lonely when he decided to build this statue, because he had no one to share his achievements with, so he could only use this form to remind people to remember him," Penelope said suddenly. This certainly sounds a bit absurd. But William couldn't help feeling a little depressed, because if what Penelope said was true, Salazar Slytherin didn't even have the opportunity to show this statue to his friends. "But you are different from him, completely different." Penelope looked at William seriously. From the first day he came to Hogwarts, she witnessed what William had accomplished, which was beyond what any other little wizard could do or even think of, but William completed it easily, and with an efficiency that would make people feel incredible. This question was only answered a while ago. Who would have thought that a fourth-year transfer student would be Heisenberg? But this answer itself brought more questions. Why did he come to Hogwarts? How did he think of those things? What does he want to do in the future? In Penelope's view, William is like a magician. Every time he smiled and put his hand into the black hat, he would always pull out something new, whether it was a rabbit, a flower, or a group of pigeons. Everyone would appreciate the novel magic and applaud them crazily. But the audience often doesn't really care how the magician achieves it, and for this reason, magicians are often lonely. But that would be too disappointing. Penelope bit her lower lip gently. At the beginning, she was also just an audience member who couldn't help but admire the magician's performance, but later, she felt that compared with his performances, the magician himself was equally interesting, or even more interesting. She wanted to be a magician's assistant, just like Watson to Sherlock Holmes, because a magician would only tell his secrets to his trusted assistant. It is said that Salazar Slytherin originally built this chamber of secrets just to have a secret place where he could share those secrets that were not suitable for other wizards with his apprentices. William said abruptly to change the subject. Having read Slytherin's notes, he naturally knew that those secrets actually referred to the unforgivable curses. At the beginning of the establishment of Hogwarts, the four giants had reached a consensus. They would never use black magic in this castle, let alone use them to hurt others. But unfortunately, it was mentioned in Hogwarts, a history of the school, that decades later, in order to avenge his students, Salazar, who was in great grief, broke this agreement himself and killed the black wizard who was about to escape with Avada Kedavra. During the conversation, they walked through the long square. During these days, a shallow layer of water has accumulated on the ground of the Chamber of Secrets. Salazar Slytherin's mouth was wide open. Usually the basilisk must rest behind here. William pointed to the deep passage. What's behind that? Penelope raised the wand with a gentle light curiously and looked inside. The hidden door had already closed automatically, and only Harry could open it. Why don't we go and take a look? William said excitedly. That night, after discovering the real secret room left by Slytherin, they were busy moving away various precious books, materials, and therefore did not continue to explore forward, because William also had some guesses about where this passage led to. The pipeline plan showed that after leaving that area, there was only a lonely water outlet. In fact, it was true. After walking along the dark passage for a while, William and Penelope saw a faint light. It came from an extremely spacious passage made of bricks and stones. Many pipes bypassed the secret room and gathered together here. In the middle of the pipe was a wide waterway. The water level was about halfway up, and on both sides were narrow walkways. William could clearly smell the fragrance of Penelope's long hair beside him, and he saw that her cheeks were slightly red. At the end of the passage, the upper part of the wall was sealed with red bricks. The waterway flowed out from here and gathered into the Black Lake. We must be very close to the Black Lake now, William guessed. It was hard for him to imagine how they dug out such a secret room that was as deep as the bottom of the Black Lake in the era of the four giants. In front of them, there was a metal platform that should have been silver in the past. In front of this platform was a wooden pole with a groove leading straight to the top. Chapter 143 The Best Wizard to House Elves. Is this a magical version of an old-fashioned elevator? William suddenly became interested. At least 1,000 years ago, wizards were obviously more creative than ordinary people of the same era. The appearance of the Hogwarts Express a few hundred years ago also proved that wizards at that time were not closed-minded and showed a relatively open attitude towards technology. But why has the wizarding world become like this now? All good things approach their goals in a tortuous way, but it is no longer a concept that can be represented by tortuousness. It is more like making a 180-degree turn, or simply reversing. William suddenly had this idea. After sensing William and Penelope approaching, the wooden pole blocking the elevator was suddenly pulled up, allowing them to stand on the platform calmly. William found that this metal platform was actually not small. If it was a little crowded, it could probably accommodate 8 of himself, 10 Penelopes, or 4 or 5 Marcus Flints. He and Penelope walked onto the platform. With a slight vibration, the metal platform began to rise at a steady speed. It went up all the way, surrounded by walls made of exquisite stone bricks. It seemed that because it had been so long, a lot of moss squeezed out from the cracks of the bricks. After about 1 or 2 minutes, the elevator finally stopped very smoothly, and the wooden pole rose, allowing William and Penelope to walk out. They found themselves in a passage that was diagonally upward, and heard the sound of waves hitting the shore not far away. "It looks like this is the exit of the Chamber of Secrets," Penelope whispered, and her tone seemed to sound a little regretful. "Maybe this was the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets in the past," William corrected her. The appearance of this elevator well explained how the Slytherin students, those little wizards who did not have the talent of Parseltongue, secretly went to the Chamber of Secrets and learned from Slytherin when the Chamber of Secrets was first built. This passage is not long. At the end of the passage, there is a ladder slightly taller than him, connected to a black wooden secret door above. "Pure blood," William read out the words engraved on the inside of the secret door. With a light click sound, the secret door quickly opened. A somewhat cold and steamy wind blew in his face, carrying the fishy smell of lake water. A ray of not-so-strong sunlight struggled to pass through the thick winter clouds and shone obliquely on his face. "Is this the small dock next to the Black Lake?" Penelope poked her head out from behind him and said after carefully identifying the surroundings. It was a somewhat shabby wooden boathouse with a tall, tattered cabinet in the corner, and some strange, tattered jars were piled in a corner of it. The floor of the room was affected by the water vapor because it was close to the Black Lake, and no one had maintained it for a long time, so it had already been damaged and warped. "Do you remember? It is set in Hogwarts, a history that when the castle was built, the 4 giants swam across the Black Lake to the castle. Slytherin had suggested that they use the apparition method, but they finally decided to swim over so that they could be more familiar with the environment around the castle," Penelope said suddenly. William was not unfamiliar with this record. Maybe this place really means something to him. William could only guess that Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets was not really a secret. On the contrary, maybe when he first designed the Chamber of Secrets, it was out of a strong sense of belonging to Hogwarts. "Thank you, William." Standing beside William, Penelope said softly. Her voice was so small that William, who was observing the wooden house, almost didn't notice it. "Nothing. I just want to say that we should go back to the castle. I just heard that the house elves in the castle will do their best to prepare lunch today." Penelope shook her head and said with a smile. Her words were not false at all. Since arriving at the castle, William had never experienced such a sumptuous lunch. The house elves had used almost all their skills, not caring about the consumption of ingredients and the effort required to prepare these foods, just to make the usual monotonous and simple lunch become as grand as a festive dinner. While William was enjoying this unusually delicious lunch, a mug suddenly appeared in front of him, with crooked handwriting engraved on it, dedicated to Mr. Buffalo, the best wizard to the house elves. "I think they must have misunderstood the definition of the best." William looked at it in surprise. He really didn't expect that the house elves would give this gift. This even put William in a dilemma. He shouldn't exploit the labor of the house elves in this way, but doing so would make them lose the meaning of life. How about less oppression? No. We have to arrange a sufficient and full schedule for them. It's better to give them more subsidies as compensation. House elves who work overtime can get a bottle of Coke. This problem didn't bother William for too long. But what he didn't expect was that the sumptuous lunch was just the beginning of his wonderful day. In the afternoon transfiguration class, Professor McGonagall gave William 20 extra points for successfully transforming a vivid 8-eyed giant spider. In this class, Professor McGonagall prepared a lot of pillows and asked the little wizards to try to transform them into 8-eyed giant spiders. This was like a test question tailored for William, and he was very familiar with it. "Well done, Buffalo. If I hadn't seen you waving your wand with my own eyes, I would have thought it was a real 8-eyed giant spider. I can see that you must have spent a lot of energy to enrich its details." Professor McGonagall nodded in satisfaction and praised. But William's heart was beating fast. How did Professor McGonagall know that I am good at transforming 8-eyed giant spiders? Did Dumbledore tell them? Then wouldn't it be for the sake of Merlin's ponytail? So please spare me. William felt a headache when he thought of the devil's snare. Christmas is coming soon, and the Christmas atmosphere in the castle has become more and more intense. The fireplaces in the classrooms and the common room are always burning with strong flames. The weather is so cold that even Madame Malkin's robes and linings can't dispel the coldness of the body. This chill is even more unbearable at night. Are you ready to witness history? William, with a ruddy face, rubbed his hands and said excitedly. He walked at the front of the team, They can already see the shadow of the tall whomping willow. A lonely bench is placed right in front of the whomping willow, which looks very abrupt, and under it, after a layer of soil, there is a space that is wider than the Quidditch field. Adjust the state, there is no need for 3K words in the transition chapter, and then enter the next part. Chapter 144 Grey Matter Center, 5K words 2 in 1 chapter. Professor Flitwick cast a protective spell on this chair, so that it won't fly away inexplicably due to strong winds or something like that. Fred pointed to the bench that served as the entrance and explained. The way to get in is very simple. George sat in the middle of the bench, took out his wand, and said clearly, "Password, password." William was a little confused. Then, the bench suddenly split into 2 sides, revealing the deep passage hidden underneath, and George fell down with a whoosh. The password was indeed a literal password. To be honest, this is only slightly better than 123,456. William thought of the passwords he had used on many websites in his previous life, which were similar to the password being password. Let's go over there quickly. The wind is really strong. Fred urged William and Penelope to sit on the bench together. Password. Fred shouted the password. William felt his body falling rapidly, but when he was about to hit the ground, he was suspended in midair again. He saw himself floating in front of a very tall metal door, which was divided into 5 layers vertically. Professor Dumbledore cast the invisible extension charm himself. It is hard for us to imagine how he did it, Fred explained. He and William had consulted on how to cast the invisible extension charm. It was indeed a difficult spell, usually only encountered in Newt-level courses, and the space it could expand was actually limited by many conditions. Before that, you know what the most important thing is. This big baby now needs a resounding name, George urged excitedly, pointing to the metal plate at the top of the door. There was nothing there, waiting for William to fill it in. After a brief thought, William confirmed his idea. I think we should call it the Grey Matter Center. Of course, part of the name came from one of his favorite American TV series, in which the young Heisenberg founded this company, but William thought that the name Grey Matter Center fit his idea very well. In the future, we will not rely entirely on white magic, but we will not be a dark wizard either. We will use various means to create magical substances, and this is of course just a center, a beginning. He explained his idea to several people. That sounds interesting, Penelope nodded gently. Yes, at least it sounds much better than Weasley's Wizard Wheezes. Fred also nodded in agreement. Hey, don't forget, that name was chosen by the 2 of us together. You are also one of the Wheel Eyes. George hooked Fred's arm hard, pretending to be angry, and then turned to William. It's your moment to name it, isn't it? If it weren't for you, it wouldn't have been born. Then, William took out his wand and engraved its Grey Matter Center in neat golden font on the huge metal plate. Come in and take a look, Fred rubbed his hands and said excitedly. He tapped the area on the upper left corner of the iron door with his wand, causing a faint white fluorescence there. It dissipated into the air, revealing the bright and vast space inside. It was as big as a Quidditch pitch, and at least 3 or 4 Hagrids tall. In the square, according to the architect Mr. Anderson, there was a tall stone pillar at intervals to support the load, so that it would not be destroyed. These areas borrowed the design concept of Hogwarts. Professor Flitwick gave them a sun that looked the same as the outside world, and at night, many gentle light balls would be raised to the sky by magic to provide stable lighting. The spell as the answer to the version also solved the ventilation problem of the enclosed space. On the 3 sides of the area, there were large movable vents, which led directly to the edge of the cliff, and the spells accelerated the circulation of air inside and outside at all times. The wizard who invented the whirlwind sweep spell would never have thought that one day hundreds of years later, his spell would be used as an air conditioner and exhaust fan. To be honest, I will never forget the wonderful time when I cast the explosive spell here wantonly. Fred sighed. No one will ever have the opportunity to do such a great thing at Hogwarts again, George whispered in agreement. The Grey Matter Center almost perfectly turned William's idea into reality, and even did more. Such a vast space, the Grey Matter Center has 3 floors, and William has different plans for their functions. Area A, Magical Creatures and Herbs Industrial Park. Hagrid and Professor Kettleburn will usually take care of it here, responsible for the cultivation and harvesting of rare and valuable magical biological materials. Area A currently has 2 projects that are running smoothly, namely the Fire Ash Snake and the Basilisk, and will introduce the mandrake provided by the Malfoy family. In the future, William will try to introduce other magical creatures, such as 35 gold galleons a pint, or let Hagrid's nature develop. William has long been aware that as long as Hagrid is left alone, he will always find a way to get all kinds of cute little creatures that are not suitable for raising in castles and forests. They have a ferocious appearance and deadly power, and most of the time they will spit fire and explode. In the future, Area A will replace the shops in Diagon Alley and the Forbidden Forest and become William's most relied on raw material production area. Area B, Standardized Magic Potion Industrial Park. Unlike Area A, which largely retains the original flavor of Wizards, in William's plan, the Magic Potion Industrial Park will introduce a large amount of ordinary people's wisdom to modernize, standardize and industrialize traditional magic potions. Whether it is William's improved love potion, coffee companion, or awakening agent and other formulas, they will be split into many links, handled by different wizards, and finally become finished products and put on the market. The animal and plant raw materials provided by Area A will also be concentrated and processed in batches in Area B. This will be the area with the largest number of participants and the highest production capacity, because it not only bears the need to produce goods for the wizard market, but also reversely exports wizard products to the world of ordinary people when the opportunity is ripe. Of course, that will be properly hidden. Although the Wizard Confidentiality Act prohibits wizards from selling magic props or magic potions to the world of ordinary people, it does not make a very detailed definition of such things. After further diluting the love potion to a certain extent, William can apply for a patent for it and put it into the production line of cosmetics. It does contain a very small amount of potion ingredients, but many products in the ordinary world also use other materials that wizards would regard as magical creatures. William believes that after gaining the understanding of the officials, they will also realize that this is just a beautiful accident. Snape can be the director of Area B. Senior students above the 6th grade can intern in Area B after their grades meet the standards. In this way, I don't even need to provide them with wages. Those who perform very well can be issued an excellent internship certificate and start a 6-month internship directly after graduation. William felt that he was too kind. Even employees in the internship period have the opportunity to contact actual work and can work like regular employees in advance. Anyway, the wizarding world does not have 5 social insurances and 1 housing fund, let alone trade unions, labor bureaus, and antitrust laws. Area C, New Alchemy Industrial Zone. The alchemy here is more of a general concept. Because whether it is rune products, alchemy products, or other mystical crafts, they will be industrialized here. Whether it is the production process of the wand and broomstick that William obtained from Salazar Slytherin's collection, or the various formulas he learned from Nicholas Flamel's manuscripts, they will all be transformed into a more efficient mode of modern industrial production. Although the spirit of craftsmanship seems very touching under the media's hype, after carefully comparing the cost-effectiveness, William still feels that the products produced by large machines are more convenient and easy to use. In addition, the magic tricks that the Weasley brothers have made, as well as the magic props under the Grey Matter brand, will also be made here and be labeled with a unified label. The mission of Area C, when it was born, was to make almost all the shops in Diagon Alley meaningless. It also shoulders the important mission of formulating the industry standards and rules of the future wizarding world. At the current stage, William will be directly responsible for the projects in Area C. When the opportunity matures in the future, Area C will be handed over to the Weasley brothers. Area D, Black Box Area. The Black Box Area will be the most unique area. This is an experimental area. Projects in the R&D stage, very sensitive research that must be kept confidential, as well as the most cutting-edge spells, transfiguration, black magic and white magic exploration, will all take place in the Black Box Area. This is the brain and hub of the Grey Matter Center conceived by William, because it is responsible for providing the required intellectual support to other areas. All members allowed to enter Area D must undergo the most rigorous background check, standard issue truth serum assessment, and Imperious and memory charm tests for magic removal potions, and can only enter the area assigned to their own projects. At this stage, Area D currently only has William's own project, but he believes that after being provided with the right environment and resources, other wizards will also burst out with amazing creativity. Let's not talk about anything else. Snape has improved a lot of potion formulas during his time at school, and even invented a very powerful offensive spell God of War, as well as the pranks and tricks that Fred and George have done. The wizarding world has never lacked talent, But talent always lacks resources and environment. What William wants to do is to provide these talents with enough conditions to inspire their creativity. The usual manager of Area D is the Ghost Bloody Baron. He is very suitable for working in this area because he can enter and control objects, and guide people from different project teams to their respective areas. William is not worried that he will be bewitched or influenced. Whether it is the Confusion spell, the Oblivion spell, or the Imperious spell, it is impossible to take effect on a ghost. As for the main security method of Area D, it is mainly a very classic white magic Albus Dumbledore flying. After casting enough protective spells on the door, the entire wall, and the outer frame connected to the wall, if there are still dark wizards who can break into Area D, then such enemies are no longer enemies that William can deal with. Of course, this is just my current idea. There will certainly be some immature and imperfect parts in the blueprint, but we have enough time to slowly adjust and adapt. William carefully told his companions about his idea of the Grey Matter Center. They have already visited Area D and returned to the metal door as the entrance. To be honest, friend William, I can't understand you anymore after you talked about Area B, Fred said sullenly. For the first time, he felt so clearly that he was just a fool, just like being given a tea in front of everyone in Snape's class. I'm almost there, George nodded and replied. He understood every word William said, but when they were connected, it became something completely incomprehensible. Industrialization, process, standardization, advanced technology converted into efficient productivity. For Merlin's bloomers. Even though the Weasley family was the pure-blood wizard family that knew the most about the world of ordinary people, they still felt that it was like a heavenly book that was difficult to understand and even unimaginable. This is certainly a very grand blueprint, and I think it can be realized. In fact, I am looking forward to seeing your blueprint come true, which will definitely be very beautiful. Penelope nodded thoughtfully. Although William's thinking still seemed a little difficult for her, Penelope still did her best to follow up. But I still have a question. What? William was resetting the password and method of entry for each area. What do you want to do with this Grey Matter Center? You only mentioned what it will look like and how you will achieve it, but you never said why you want to do this, Penelope asked softly. This simple question is not simple. To be honest, I have been looking for the answer to this question myself, but not knowing the answer to this question does not really affect our actions, right? William answered seriously, and at the same time waved his wand and opened the passage to the last floor. Its entrance is also on the metal door, but at the bottom of the 4 areas, with a loud boom sound, the metal door connecting the previous 4 areas rose up, revealing the narrow passage at the bottom. This floor is the real secret of the Grey Matter Center. It is located at the bottom of all areas, and at the same time crosses the edge of the 4 areas, extending to the top of the Grey Matter Center, wrapping their steel frames in it and connecting them to each other. From this floor, several passages extend all the way to the Forbidden Forest and Hogsmeade. This is the basement. But this is not just a basement. In addition to being a storage warehouse for the most precious items, William's personal study, laboratory, dormitory, and activity center, it also connects the entire Grey Matter Center and wraps them in a fully enclosed metal shell. William has always had a crazy idea. When he has accumulated enough magic gold and linked them in a reasonable way, William can use the entire Grey Matter Center as an extremely huge single magic prop, and even make it float, invisible, and fly, with both offense and defense. What is a wizard tower? What is a floating city? Don't you still have to look at my Grey Matter Center? William had an urge to pinch his waist and show off. Although the current Grey Matter Center is just an empty shell, he is sure that he is on the right path. When William and his team gradually improve the functions of several areas and introduce enough outstanding wizard talents, the Grey Matter Center will explode with destructiveness that other wizards can hardly imagine. The output that can be achieved here alone is enough to monopolize the needs of the entire British wizarding world. When small workshops like Diagon Alley were overwhelmed by William's large-scale production model, wizards who were already short of jobs either saw transformation or could only work for William. The most fatal point is that William's model is unstoppable. This will be a gradual infiltration process. William will not launch a comprehensive war that sweeps the wizarding world like Grindelwald and Voldemort. He will only swallow a small part each time. Potions, alchemy potions, flying brooms, magic furniture, entertainment, culture, lifestyle. The closure of a Madame Purnell in Diagon Alley is nothing. This kind of thing will always happen. But when wizards have adapted to the products and services provided by William and even began to work for him, Those decadent traditional wizards finally realized that their status was being seriously challenged. William has accumulated enough power and influence to compete with him. He does not need to defeat his opponent through tricks, he just needs to prevent his opponent from using tricks to put pressure on himself. With Dumbledore and Harry Potter standing by his side, William was not worried about his opponents using those dirty tricks that were not presentable. Moreover, as a time traveler, if he compared his bottom line, he was much lower than these old antique wizards. The only way for the pure-blood families to compete with his gray matter center was to overtake him on the same track. They had to rely on the creativity of excellent wizards and follow William's model, but excellent wizards would often be hired by William himself before graduation because the gray matter center was located in Hogwarts, the best magic school in Europe and the cradle of top wizard talents. Is there a more powerful industry-university collaboration than this? William suddenly thought of a sentence in the Gospel of Matthew, "For whoever has, to him shall be given, and he shall have in abundance, but whoever does not have, even what he has shall be taken away from him." People summarize it as the Matthew effect. The literal translation of Ravenclaw's name is Raven's Claw. They are greedy plunderers of knowledge. Right. That's right. It must be like this. He clapped his hands excitedly, startling Penelope and the two Wheel Eyes following behind him. William thought of the night he first arrived at Hogwarts. In the common room of Ravenclaw, he heard this strange voice, and later found an old copy of Beowulf in a small niche in Ravenclaw. The voice told him a string of words. Lelhia ita sugztsrnirr say. William initially thought it was a strange language, or a strange spell or something, but as his understanding of magic deepened, William became convinced that this was actually a compiled code. To decipher this code, you need to rely on a specific number and the rules on which it was established. It feels awkward to divide this chapter anyway, so I just don't divide it. Chapter 145, a difficult choice. Ravenclaw's common room. In the quiet of the night, only the roaring charcoal fire in the fireplace kept William company. After returning to the castle from the Grey Center, he began to solve the number puzzle. He spent a lot of time and tried many combinations, and now he is very close to the correct answer. The tattered Beowulf was placed on the sofa next to him. William had made sure that the book did not record any clues that might help him decipher the puzzle. The magic number is 3. This is not surprising. Not all numbers are considered to have mystical significance by wizards. This is a list so short that even Professor Flitwick can hardly fit it. Since ancient times, wizards have always respected numbers with magic. Alchemists are particularly fond of 3. 7 is considered a number that cannot be surpassed by magic, and wizards who study necromancy prefer 9 and 13, because it has a special blasphemous meaning in religious terms. Lelhia ita sugztsrnirr say. Suppose this was originally a complete sentence, but a letter was taken away every 3 letters. In other words, in the original sentence, the 3rd letter was L and the 6th letter was A. William turned to a new page in his notebook. He began to restore the code according to this record. Comma, represents the letters he could not confirm for the time being. Question mark, L, A, L, H, I, A, I, T. It seems to be like this. So the letters in the second row are the letters of the first row that were stripped off and then plundered again. The original letters became La, A, S, L, H, I, Wa, Ig, T. Although he was still confused, William saw some patterns in the new arrangement he got. So, he still did it this way next, and if he put them back, it would be Laza, S, L, the, I, was, Ig, T. It was clearer now, Lazarus, the, in was, Ig, T. After repeating it several times, William finally succeeded in cracking the code. When all the capital letters were erased, it became, Salazar Slytherin was right. Salazar Slytherin was right. William was sure that this was the correct answer, not some kind of mischievous coincidence. He placed the book Beowulf on the short table in front of him, put his wand against the cover, and whispered the text. A gentle bronze light suddenly lit up. The brown cover of Beowulf began to fade rapidly, turning into an ivory white without any impurities. The originally thick pages began to stick to each other, and large paragraphs of thin text began to appear. But William did not recognize these words. William was sure that they did not belong to any writing system he knew, whether it was Latin, French, English, ancient magic words, Russian, or the Chinese language he used in his previous life. The words began to flash with dazzling light. It suddenly generated a strong suction force, sucking William, who was still thinking about the meaning of these words. After a short free fall, William found himself sitting in an elegant and graceful bedroom. There was a large bed with browns and blue curtains around it. The room was enchanted, making its ceiling very high, and several large bookcases reached a height of about 1.5 hagrids. The sun shone through a French window opposite William. From this corner, William could overlook several spires belonging to the Quidditch field in the distance. Is this Hogwarts Castle? Ravenclaw Tower, William speculated. Knock, knock, knock. The door of the room was suddenly knocked. But before the owner of the room could answer, the visitor had already turned the handle and walked in. He was a middle-aged man with fiery red hair and vigorous spirit, and a Byzantine-style complicated robe was put on him. What was particularly eye-catching was his waist, where a long sword decorated with red gems hung in its scabbard. He did look like a middle-aged man. But his eyes had a wisdom and brilliance that had accumulated over the years, just like Dumbledore's, which made William, who saw him, subconsciously describe him as vigorous. Rowena, are you feeling better today? Baron has left the castle, and I believe he will find Helena soon. She is your daughter after all, Godric Gryffindor said with concern, and he walked quickly to the bed and drew open the curtain. On the bed lay a woman whose face was so pale that there was almost no trace of blood. William was not unfamiliar with her face. She looked almost exactly the same as the marble statue in the common room. Although Ravenclaw had also experienced the baptism of time, she looked much younger than Gryffindor. I don't have a daughter like her, she said in a calm tone with almost no ripples. Alice. I believe she just didn't think too much at the moment. She is still young and can't understand your thoughts. Not becoming a talented Ravenclaw is not something she should regret, Gryffindor sighed softly. These days, I feel that my life is withering more and more. Even in a clear moment like this, I can hear its whispers. Even if she didn't leave with a crown, after a while, maybe I will be lost in a corner of the world. Ravenclaw raised his head slightly and looked at Gryffindor's profile. She wanted to raise her right hand, but her body was weak and her attempts failed. Rowena, stop talking about these disappointing things. You have been fighting against this voice for so long, and I believe you will be able to resist them in the future. What important things do you want to tell me? Gryffindor lowered his head, as if he didn't dare to look into her eyes again, and instead held her right hand with his broad and rough hands. I had a dream, Ravenclaw said calmly. But her words made Gryffindor's face suddenly become extremely nervous, as if the dream she mentioned was not such a simple thing. You didn't drink the living hell potion? Didn't we agree not to dream anymore? His voice sounded a little panicked. What's the point? We all know that I don't have much time left. What difference will it make next week, the day after tomorrow, or an hour later? As a prophet, this is the curse that Ravenclaw has to bear. Ravenclaw comforted him. Godric, my old friend, if you really still trust me like you did back then, remember what I'm going to say next, remember them firmly, don't forget even a word, she said with all her strength. In the dream, I was in a deep, dark ocean, but I saw many bright spots. The voice had never been as clear as it was then. It seemed to be talking to me directly in my mind. It wanted me to promise it something. As long as I did so, it would restore my health, both physically and spiritually. Even just saying such a long paragraph seemed to be a very difficult task for Ravenclaw at the moment. She had to stop and rest for a while. But her words set off a storm in William's heart. A deep, dark ocean, many bright spots, except for the voice. These are almost all right. William recalled his dream. What does it want you to promise it? Destroy Hogwarts Castle. Gryffindor frowned. This strange dream flows in the blood of the Ravenclaw family, or in other words, almost all wizards with a gift of prophecy. Professor Cassandra, the prophecy teacher in the castle, also mentioned that her prophecy was told to her by a great being in a dream, and later all came true. Following this voice would indeed bring them great benefits. The last time Ravenclaw heard this voice and followed its words was many years ago. It took the shape of a warthog and led her to a cliff. Later, they built Hogwarts here. But Rowena never trusted that voice. She certainly needed to recover her health. As long as powerful wizards like the Big Four did not have the intention to die, they could live for a very, very long time, until even the wonderful magic could no longer save their lives. It taught me a spell and wanted me to teach it to as many muggles as possible. I have studied it. After spending a lot of time studying and practicing, even the dumbest muggles can master some magical talents. The talents obtained in this way will not allow them to cast even the simplest spells, but they are enough to make them take half a step from muggles to becoming wizards. Ravenclaw paused. But if that's the case, these muggles are just squibs, and they are not wizards. Does it want us wizards to keep more muggles as slaves? Cryfinder asked in confusion. Squibs refer to people who were born in wizard families, out of the category of muggles, and cannot be driven away by spells such as muggle expulsion. They can see magical creatures such as dementors that only wizards can see, but they do not have any talent for performing magic, such as Mr. Filch, the castle manager of Hogwarts, or Mrs. Fig, the neighbor of Harry Potter's uncle. Do you remember the warning that Salazar sent us? I believe that it seems to want to quickly expand the wizard community, but does not want us to become stronger because of this, Ravenclaw said in a serious tone. We have a difficult choice to make. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 146 Thief. Do you remember what Salazar Slytherin said? We are just a group of shameless thieves. If we occasionally go to the house of the sleeping owner and take away some harmless property, he may not wake up for a while. But if we visit too frequently, make too big a move, or even steal the bed of the owner of the house, Ravenclaw proposed a wonderful metaphor. Her words made William think of something. Alchemy follows the principle of equivalent exchange. Although the magic ingredients are complex and mysterious, the products of alchemy are ultimately derived from its raw materials, but spells are not like this. Every day, every hour, and even every second, there are many wizards in this world waving wands and using spells to achieve many things that were originally almost impossible to achieve through a human power. But they have not paid any commendable price except for insignificant magic power and spit. Even baboons waving wands like Crabbe, Goyle, and Marcus can use spells after a period of study. Are wizards really born noble? Or is it that the cost that they should have borne was actually borne by something else invisibly, so that they seem to have no cost? But free things are often the most expensive. As a time traveler, William, after seeing all kinds of free shopping tours, free mobile games, and investment projects that guarantee high returns, no longer believes in this kind of pie-in-the-sky saying. Really? Cryfinder showed a shocked expression on his face. I don't have any evidence to support my idea. It's just a guess, but in fact, we have always doubted it, right? Whether it is the resolute attitude shown by another Slytherin to eliminate Muggle-born wizards, or the attentive attitude shown when we proposed to build a wizard school, Ravenclaw gently patted the back of Gryffinder's hand. Rowena, after Salazar, you have always been the smartest among us. Tell me what to do, and I will definitely do it with Helga. Gryffinder bit his lips tightly. Shocked by this conjecture, he even subconsciously said the fact that he had never dared to admit Ravenclaw was likely to die, and that would not be on the sickbed, but in the middle of a night when no one knew, he would disappear alone in the castle. We must make a choice, whether to fight hard and do our best to make the wizarding world stronger in a short period of time, or to stay silent and let wizards develop as slowly as possible until it is inevitable or accumulates enough to change the truth of this weapon and choose the millennium, Ravenclaw said word by word. But when William was listening carefully, he found that her voice was becoming more and more vague, as if it was from a long distance. Although Ravenclaw was getting weaker and weaker, she suddenly propped up her upper body with great difficulty, and her bright blue eyes turned to William, with a beautiful and incredible light in her eyes. The memory stopped here. William found himself holding the old book Beowulf and sitting on the sofa in front of the fireplace. What he just witnessed was like a dream. He pointed his wand at the book again. Salazar Slytherin is right, William read out the password anxiously. But nothing happened. She's looking at me, William suddenly thought of the look just now. This is of course an extremely absurd idea. No matter how you think about it, this memory happened nearly 1,000 years ago, and Gryffinder and Ravenclaw would never know his existence. So there's only one possibility left. She's looking at me. William was naturally not referring to himself, but the witness who was present at the time. Perhaps it was this unidentified person who recorded this memory and hid it. The password Salazar Slytherin seemed normal, but William felt more and more wrong. Because it was written in modern English. Thousands of years ago, when Hogwarts was established, the language used in this land was very mixed. Old English, French, Latin, and the language brought by the Vikings were all used. But the only thing that could not be modern English was. Judging from this memory alone, It seems that Gryffindor and Hufflepuff finally chose to slow down their pace and deliberately slow down the development of the wizarding world. This certainly explains the emergence of the Statute of Wizarding Secrecy, and it also barely explains the phenomenon that there has been almost no substantial progress in the wizarding world in the past few hundred years. Because this is a giant ship that starts to leak from the top. But even so, although the speed is very slow, compared with 1,000 years ago, the wizarding world has also made significant progress. William remembered that at the end of Ravenclaw's words, she clearly mentioned the millennium. It was already after the first millennium, so she naturally meant 2000, which is 9 years later. But I remember that in the original book, after defeating Voldemort, they all became middle-aged, which is how to say it is the 21st century. William suddenly thought of this question. But then he came up with the answer himself. Gellert Grindelwald and Tom Riddle, the two generations of dark demons, caused great damage to the wizarding world. Perhaps it was for this reason that the original Doomsday was coincidentally postponed. Or is this really a coincidence? But the situation now is completely different from what it was before. William had to admit that he seemed to be flapping his wings too hard, so that invisibly, as Heisenberg, he had set off a new wave of innovation in the wizarding world. Although it is still limited to relatively simple improvements, innovative spells, or the exploration of various magical skills and magical experiments. But after the quantitative changes accumulate to a sufficient degree, it will eventually reach a point where qualitative changes occur. The fire was ignited. William could no longer choose another way and live honestly for decades. When the entire wizarding world is on the decline, someone must sit in the driver's seat and step on the accelerator twice. William once thought it was just a joke, but he didn't expect it to become a prophecy. This is really interesting. A very strong sense of excitement arose in William's heart. He stood up and paced in the empty public lounge. This memory did reveal disturbing news, but it did not scare William. On the contrary, the world is becoming more colorful and challenging, which makes William, who originally thought he would feel bored, suddenly excited. First, I must think of a way to thoroughly test the authenticity of this memory. I think the statue must know something, but if I want to unlock it, I must peel off the old futau in the crown, which is a difficult thing. William quickly thought about his next move. Stripping the old futau's Horcrux will not only help him unlock the upgrade function of the Rowena Ravenclaw statue, but also help William improve his own strength. The silver net can capture the wandering soul and feed it back to William, strengthening his soul and allowing him to control more magic power. Secondly, I need to put the gray matter center into use quickly and put several projects at hand into production. William carefully calculated the projects that he had almost matured and could be put on the market. The most important one was the Natural Gray Matter Magic Props brand, which was designed for personal protection props for wizards. Some time ago, after consulting some university professors, he thought that the production process of coffee mate could be accelerated by finding the right enzyme and temperature. Besides, Snape obviously wouldn't mind having his senior students help with the work. OTC potions seemed to be available soon. Magic Gold and household magic props derived from Magic Gold still needed some time to settle. But using Magic Gold on flying brooms, although it seemed a bit of a waste of talent, was something that could be achieved by next week at the latest. William believed that after all the broom manufacturers were driven out of the market, he would encounter less resistance when he wanted to promote other personal flying machines. Finally, there's my personal strength. This was the most fundamental factor. William absolutely did not want to experience the feeling of powerlessness when facing Voldemort again. He had to improve himself in all aspects and without blind spots, whether it was imitating the wizards of the enchantment school and making a lot of magic props for himself, or improving his hard power. Fortunately, he had a lot to learn now. Unfortunately, he only had a limited amount of hair. But what was even more fortunate was that, unlike the world he lived in his previous life, in the wizard world, hair growth spirits and anti-hair loss potions could really work, rather than playing a psychological role that could barely be regarded as a placebo effect. This is really a pleasant surprise. What a hammer. It's not worth being thankful for at all. So why do I have to lose my hair? Burying his face in the soft pillow, William felt extremely indignant. How much he wanted to have a system that could transmit all kinds of knowledge to his head with just a ding. William slowly fell asleep. In the next few days, life at Hogwarts did not have any ups and downs. It was nothing more than Professor Sprout deducting 1 point from William because he did not wear gloves when handing her the flower pot, and watching his every move during get out of class. I heard that when Professor Sprout was moving the plants from the greenhouse to the Hufflepuff common room, she found that she had lost a lot of things without realizing it. After class, Penelope said with a chuckle. She has no evidence. I mean, it wasn't me who did it, and no one saw those things go missing, right? Besides, if she pursues it, you're also an accomplice. William raised his voice with a guilty conscience. Of course, Penelope just smiled and ignored him. In the next few days, William deliberately did not explore Nicholas Flamel's things in the east corridor of the 4th floor, nor did he promote the project of the Grey Matter Center. Instead, he lived a relaxed campus life like a normal fourth-year wizard at Hogwarts. After a very pleasant snowy night, William woke up and the entire Hogwarts castle was wrapped in silver. And the snow on the grass was as thick as Professor Flitwick's waist. It's Christmas. I finally pushed the worldview of the original part to this point, and I feel that I can hold it back. The first volume is about to end, so let's spread the flowers. The content of the second volume will return to the main line of alchemical black technology. In addition, artificial intelligence, soul training, and large factory production mode will also officially appear. And the threat still exists. By the way, I recommend this book. Chapter 147. You can always trust Slytherin, 2 chapters in 1. Hogwarts is on holiday. The students who need to go home for Christmas left the castle yesterday and took the Hogwarts Express back to London. William's situation is a little different. He will spend Christmas at Hogwarts because as a transfer student, he has no other suitable place to go. But he will spend the whole holiday in Diagon Alley. The Hogwarts castle on the day before Christmas has completely changed. When William, who is used to getting up early, came to the hall, what caught his eyes were 12 very tall fir trees. Some of them were hung with sparkling 6-pointed star-shaped snowflakes and ice crystals, and some were flickering with hundreds of candles. If Isaac Newton saw this scene, he would probably be so angry that he would be resurrected on the spot, and then die again from a cerebral hemorrhage. Those candles will keep floating with the wind. But their wax will never drip. The whole hall, or more precisely, the whole castle, is immersed in the atmosphere of Christmas. Ribbons made of mistletoe and holly were hung everywhere, and even the statues began to sing out of tune classic Christmas songs like Joy to the World, which sounded as bad as scratching a blackboard with fingernails. Hey, William, Percy called him. How does it feel to celebrate Christmas at Hogwarts for the first time? There will be a very sumptuous dinner in the evening, and the professors will also be present. Very novel. William nodded and replied. Although he still didn't understand why wizards celebrate Christmas, a festival that originated from Celtic culture and later became Christian culture, this did not prevent him from participating and enjoying this relaxed festive atmosphere. When you pass by those mistletoe today, you must be careful. I dare say that many girls will stare at you. Percy patted his shoulder and said. William was stunned for a while before he suddenly realized that Percy was playing a joke on him. The traditional custom of Christmas is that when standing under the mistletoe, girls cannot refuse a boy's kiss, otherwise they will encounter misfortune in the new year. Maybe you already have your own goal, he asked Percy, but saw that the face of the Gryffindor prefect suddenly turned red. No, how could there be? Percy stammered, but his flickering eyes revealed his insincerity. I just remembered, by the way, I have to go to the prefect meeting, see you later. Percy ran away in a hurry without waiting for William's response. Looks really embarrassed, doesn't it? He didn't even have time to eat anything in the early morning of Christmas Eve to attend the prefect meeting. Fred squeezed over. He and George had been eavesdropping. Maybe the sweet delicacy of love itself is enough for our model gentleman to have a full meal. George pretended to be an exaggerated tone like a recitative. To be honest, I really find it hard to imagine that a serious guy like Percy would find a girlfriend quietly. William was deeply shocked. He didn't do it quietly. Everyone knows about it. Remember some time ago, the Slytherin Chamber of Secrets was opened, and the whole castle had to be under curfew, and no one was allowed to act alone. Fred winked. They brothers, and William, never followed that rule. At that time, Percy got up early every day, combed himself into that look, and went to the common room every now and then. He would not pretend to meet her when she came out of the dormitory. George mercilessly exposed his brother's secrets. Percy Williams, Gryffindor, 4th year. To be honest, I always thought that girl should be sorted into Hufflepuff, but we didn't come to you for this. Fred said the name of Percy's girlfriend. William had some impression of her. She was not very active in class and always gave people a timid feeling. That's right. We spent a lot of time and finally found the right enzyme and temperature for the coffee mate. Now the whole process only takes 2 or 3 days, and one batch can produce as much as a crucible. George brought the increasingly deviated topic back to the main topic. You won't stay in the castle during the Christmas holiday, will you? If there's a chance, it would be best to find a way to sell it. We have accumulated a lot of inventory that needs to be cleared. Fred expressed his concerns. Although William was bearing the R&D costs at this stage, they watched the inventory on hand increase, but they could not turn it into gold galleons, so they felt a little anxious. He and George mentioned that they could advertise in the Daily Prophet, but this method was too inefficient and was later rejected by William. You can rest assured about this matter. I already have an idea. William patted Fred on the shoulder. The two of them, as well as Ron, had no chance to go home during the Christmas holiday, because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania with their daughter Ginny to visit Charlie, and William also entrusted them to help negotiate the import of materials with the Dragon Farm. As for the idea William mentioned, although the conditions are relatively mature, it will take some time to prepare for it to become a reality. I can meet Gilderoy Lockhart during the Christmas holidays. Maybe his reputation will play a good role in promotion, William thought to himself as he watched the Weasley brothers, who felt relieved because of his guarantee, walk towards the long table of Gryffindor. Since the opening of Nymph, Lockhart has come to the store every now and then, and has always shown a very strong desire to meet the owner in person. The letters that Lockhart left for the house elf Lalo and entrusted him to pass on to William were enough to burn in the fireplace of the Ravenclaw common room for several days. He showed such an overly attentive attitude, it is a bit strange to realize it. William has been thinking about this problem. Gilderoy Lockhart is the most prestigious best-selling author in the wizarding world, the darling of various fashion magazines, and has the Medal of the Order of Merlin, although it is only a third-level medal. Normally, after William showed his indifference that he didn't want to see him, he shouldn't have come so hard. Unless Lockhart had other intentions. Or he had no choice. William corrected his thoughts. He took some cold milk for himself, added oatmeal and 2 spoons of sugar, and took some Yorkshire pudding left over from last night. The fluffy bread was drizzled with thick gravy, which was a very satisfying dish. The entire hall was empty. While he was enjoying breakfast, a brown owl with a very fierce look suddenly flew in front of William and brought him an envelope sealed with wax and decorated with dark green ribbons. A small note was attached to the outside of the envelope, and William recognized it as Dumbledore's handwriting. William, Hall. The note had a short message. William took out his wand and opened the wax seal on the envelope. 2 pieces of parchment fell out. They were lists written in dark green ink, with a Malfoy family crest at the end of the parchment. The letter did not contain any extra words, as if the writer had no interest in greeting Dumbledore. The Yaxley family. 17 Diagon Alley, Shop 69 Diagon Alley, Shop 112 Diagon Alley, Residential 65 Nocturne Alley, The Flint family. 9 Diagon Alley, Shop 12 Diagon Alley, Shop 19 Diagon Alley, Shop. These 2 lists were naturally the properties owned by the Yaxley family and the Flint family in Diagon Alley and Nocturne Alley. Out of a sense of responsibility for their heir being bewitched by an unidentified dark wizard and a focus on the future education of Hogwarts and the wizarding world, Old Yaxley and Old Flint readily agreed to Dumbledore's proposal to donate a property to Hogwarts free of charge, and generously allow Dumbledore to choose from the properties they owned. Neither of these 2 families is reliable. The houses listed are either so remote that you can't find them even with a map, or they are in such bad condition that they may collapse at any time, and there is no way to check the owners of the shops in this world. Thinking of the letter he received 2 days ago, William was so angry that his teeth itched. Even though he had cleverly asked Lalo to ask the goblins in Diagon Alley to help identify the pile of rubbish they gave him, he almost fell into their trap. In a house on the south side of Diagon Alley listed by the Yaxley family, in addition to harmless bog art, there were even 3 evil spirits who died tragically. Fortunately, William's brain turned quickly. He asked Dumbledore to write a letter to Lucius Malfoy that day, and tactfully expressed his intention to use this opportunity to mess with the Flint family. The 2 lists given by the Malfoy family were not only much longer than the lists given by the 2 families for William to choose from, but Lucius Malfoy also bolded the fonts of some properties. When it comes to holding grudges and revenge, you can always trust a true Slytherin. William couldn't help but sigh, and at the same time summoned the house elf Lalo, asking him to go and run around the extra properties on this list, and this time he must ask a goblin to go with him. After breakfast, William quietly came to the small corridor on the east side of the 4th floor. The heavy wooden door in front of the corridor seemed to be firmly locked, but in fact, it could be easily opened with an allow open. Fluffy was no longer in the room. After the gray matter center was built, Hagrid placed it in Area A, where it had a very wide space to move freely. The appearance of this 3-headed dog also aroused Professor Kettleburn's interest. He wanted to find out whether Fluffy was a natural 3-headed dog or an unnatural product under the influence of powerful magic. I got Fluffy from a Greek I met in the tavern last year. The unlucky guy drank a few glasses of wine and started to complain non-stop, saying that Fluffy almost bit off his finger. It's a very good little guy, isn't it? It's just a little melancholy. The 3 heads often quarrel with each other, and sometimes want to bite each other off. When William asked Hagrid, he smiled and answered, as if he was describing a cute golden retriever. Not a beast that was as tall as 2 or 3 William stacked together and could eat Professor Flitwick in one bite. For Merlin's sleeveless shirt, William always had a strange feeling. For Hagrid, the tavern is like a card pool. From time to time, he can touch some surprises, such as Fluffy, dragon eggs, or blasting tail scroots. William opened the trapdoor on the ground and jumped down easily. Arresto momentum, he shouted the spell the moment he was close to the ground, and landed on the ground easily. The devil's snare had been moved away by Professor Sprouter a long time ago. She didn't want to leave it for William to torture. The next journey was also very easy. In the room where Professor Flitwick stayed, there were still many feathered keys flying around, but the silver key used to open the door was lying on the ground, sticking up like a stranded fish. Professor McGonagall's room was empty, and even the stone powder on the ground had been cleaned up. Following the last path, William easily came to the last corridor, and the dark gate of hell stood in front of him. William remembered that in the original world, Snape left a logic problem here, but there was no long table with large and small bottles of potions, nor was there a black flame to block his steps. From here, you can go straight to the City of Misery. From here, you can go straight to endless suffering. From here, you can go straight to fallen beings. As if sensing William's presence, the characters engraved on the gate of hell lit up with a black and red light, looking like fire, burning up. The suffering figure trapped on the door stretched out his hands and grabbed William, who was approaching them. The gate of hell made a loud booming sound and was slowly opening its arms to William. But in the extreme darkness, there was a ray of shining light, as if as long as William resisted the temptation and attack and walked into the door, it would guide William to get the treasure left by Nicholas Flamel. This seemed to be the challenge left by this room for him. Of course it's a trap. William raised his wand and pointed at the gate of hell. Even though this seemed to have no logical problems and the difficulty seemed very reasonable, William was sure that this was definitely not the way Nicholas Flamel wanted him to pass the level. That proud old thing didn't even respect Merlin, let alone the hell in the eyes of ordinary people. William and Nicholas Flamel really began to become familiar with each other after William wrote the most famous article, Merlin is dead. Nicholas Flamel, under the name of Hermes, refuted all the articles published by William as worthless. Nicholas Flamel believed that wizards like William at that time were just relying on some cleverness to attract attention and were not qualified to evaluate the wizarding world. It was also from that time that the stubborn William really began to try to introduce a large number of ordinary people's technologies into magic, and to prepare potions by optimizing processes, improving precision, and reducing impurities. My respected Mr. Hermes, in the world of ordinary people, the image of God is much taller than Merlin, but even he was still killed. The beginning of all this was not an enemy like me who criticized and questioned him, but the poet Dante Alighieri who expressed his own ideas in the name of praising God. Dante's Divine Comedy was the beginning of the Renaissance. In his reply, William said with a slightly sarcastic tone, "But you naturally don't know who Dante is. Perhaps you know less about the world of ordinary people than the owl that is delivering the letter to you." William originally thought that an old stubborn wizard like Hermes would stop writing to him after receiving such a letter, but he unexpectedly received another letter from him after a while. Hermes not only gave a detailed answer to the questions he asked William, but also read the Divine Comedy and consulted William on many questions about the world of ordinary people. Although many of the questions seemed very funny, such as they didn't have an owl to deliver the letter, and whether it would take a long time for people who lived far away to contact each other. Bombarda Maxima, William waved his wand. A bright fire flashed, blowing up the gate of hell, and the darkness in the gate, revealing a passage of pure light hidden behind it. Chapter 148, The Book of Abraham of the Jews. After walking into the corridor that was composed of pure white light and flickered continuously, William realized that the light here was not really white, but was formed by many overlapping pictures. They were rotating rapidly, just like the illustrated books William had seen before. The name of this illustrated book was Nicholas Flamel. Nicholas Flamel, or his more formal name, Nicholas Flamel, was perhaps the most famous alchemist in France. He was born in the 14th century and became famous for creating the greatest work in alchemy, the Philosopher's Stone. Through this magical stone, he was able to refine mercury into gold, and as long as the water in which the Philosopher's Stone had been soaked for a period of time, it would be extremely easy to extend a person's life. But few people know that before he achieved immortality, he was just a low-key bookseller living in Paris. Born into an ordinary family that was once very wealthy, Nicholas Flamel was well educated, proficient in Latin and Greek, and good at calligraphy and copying. At that time, he made a living in Paris by selling books and copying articles. He also accepted students and taught them to copy and draw illustrations. Often, nobles paid him to copy rare manuscripts. William was clearly standing in the same place, but his perspective was constantly changing, as if he was really strolling in a bustling market in Paris. This was very close to the experience of naked eye 3D movies. It would be nice if there was a recliner, William thought. In fact, he also wanted a bottle of Coke and half a bucket of popcorn. This was out of respect for Nicholas Flamel, because eating the whole bucket would make him look too disrespectful, not because William couldn't finish so much. But more often, it is those careless and unlearned nobles who foolishly hand over the extremely precious things left by their families to me and want me to give a suitable valuation. The narrator, who had no idea what William was thinking, was still explaining with a hint of smile. They don't know that I am actually an alchemist. After receiving those books that they find inexplicable, I will carefully study the contents on them and make them. This unique experience has put me ahead of all the wizards of my time, Nicholas Flamel said proudly. He has always lived such a double life. During the day, he appraised and copied documents for the nobles, and served as a tutor for the young heirs. This gave Nicholas Flamel the opportunity to access their family's library. At night, he would study magic and alchemy, and secretly put the finished products on the market in exchange for money. With the help of money, Nicholas Flamel, who has excellent magic talent and a flexible mind, made rapid progress in the field of alchemy. Not many years later, he came into contact with that field, creating his great work, and at that time Nicholas Flamel's sights were even higher. He wanted to create gold on gold. But one night, he had a dream. An angel with wings on his back came to my dream. He told me that I have a very rich color in the eyes of God and he expects a lot from me. Soon, I will get a magical book. I should study its contents hard and then I will get extraordinary power, Nicholas Flamel said with gnashing teeth. A few days later, he really exchanged to Florence for an ancient and huge book. It was made of delicate and smooth young bark. The cover was tightly wrapped with brass. It had 3 groups of 7 pages, including the first page. The 7th page of each group had no text, but on the 7th page of the first group, there was a magic wand swallowed by a giant snake. The Book of Abraham of the Jews, this is the ancient book. When Nicholas Flamel got this book at first, he was ecstatic and found a Hebrew scholar to help him translate it, but who knew that it was the beginning of a nightmare. It does record very profound alchemical knowledge. Many of the techniques mentioned in it, including the transformation of elements and the properties of substances, seemed like miracles to me at the time. However, the Book of Abraham of the Jews almost completely overturned Nicholas Flamel's own great homework. In this ancient book, it was written in the most simple and easy to understand language how to refine the Philosopher's Stone. He needed to strictly follow the instructions in the book, deduce the red stone according to the same amount of mercury, and mix them in the philosopher's egg, using a furnace called an alchemical furnace to heat. Only in this way can they finally transform into a substantial existence. In the past days, I always felt regretful for meeting Dumbledore too late, Nicholas Flamel said, somewhat discouraged. William, who had read his manuscript, naturally knew that Nicholas Flamel came up with a new idea after his attempt at magic gold failed. He believed that the Philosopher's Stone was essentially a magic that achieved the sublimation of matter, and therefore needed to extract pneuma. This is a kind of material essence and the root of life. Alchemists often extract pneuma from eggs, because the process of turning from eggs into chickens undergoes an essential change. Nicholas Flamel wants more. He wants to find a phoenix to complete his great work. From flames to phoenix. There is no miracle more suitable for completing this great task than this, but even more than 600 years ago when magical creatures were more widely distributed, the phoenix was an extremely rare and noble magical creature. If converted into a non-phoenix limited card pool, it is currently about 0.45% of the 13th. Nicholas Flamel has been resisting this impulse for 21 years, but as he grew older and the number of disappointments continued to increase, one night he finally couldn't stand this curiosity and imitated the records in the Book of Abraham of the Jews to refine the Philosopher's Stone. He succeeded with great ease. It was a very powerful Philosopher's Stone, which could not only literally turn stones into gold, but also produce a large amount of elixir of life for him and his wife to drink, but it was also incomplete. After that night, no matter how Nicholas Flamel tried, even if he completely copied the steps recorded in the book, he could never create a second miracle like this. When Nicholas Flamel wanted to go back to his old ways and refine his own great work, he found that he could no longer try to create the great work, because he had denied his own path. The great work is not a formula like a chemical experiment, but a beautiful flower that an alchemist has spent his life and thought on. It not only needs to meet the rules of material change in alchemy, but also requires the alchemist to prepare his own thoughts, resonate with the world, and let his creation be recognized by the rules of the world before the spirits. The great work is magic, and it is also beyond magic. It is a miracle that was originally impossible to achieve. One is all, and all is one. The wisdom left by the great Hermes has already pointed this out, so even if Nicholas Flamel taught his thoughts to another wizard and asked him to imitate it exactly, he would never succeed again. And even if he succeeded, it would not be Nicholas Flamel's creation. I had the opportunity to go further, even though it was just a longing, but what did I get in return? A piece of extremely powerful stone that could only turn stones into gold, and a long life that was boring, not worth being happy about, and not easily abandoned. The picture has gradually come to an end. William saw a square stone platform as high as his chest, on which there was a diamond-shaped crystal that burst into devastating silver light. Obviously, this was the magic version of the movie that Nicholas Flamel had once boasted to William. The angel with wings on his back later visited me in a dream, but at that time he had transformed into a huge red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns on his 7 heads. It laughed at my greed and said that it had easily fooled me, but it didn't know that I had also brewed my revenge. I cut a small piece of my soul as a prison and locked it in this crystal. Nicholas Flamel is a Frenchman. The French have always been petty. When you are ready, just touch this crystal gently. You will enter my dream and be able to talk to it. It is a shameless liar, an arrogant devil, but no longer an omniscient angel. If you are smart and restrained enough, you may have a chance to bite its sweet bait and escape the exquisite scam it has designed for you. Nicholas Flamel warned very seriously. This is indeed an extremely dangerous weapon, even more dangerous than the Philosopher's Stone. After Nicholas Flamel, there were also alchemists who made their own Philosopher's Stone, such as William's old friend Dr. John Dee, who had his own great work, but no Philosopher's Stone was more powerful than the one made by Nicholas Flamel. That's why Nicholas Flamel set so many challenges. Challengers need to prove that they have enough magical skills, and also have a dialectical but not necessarily materialistic mind. William carefully considered his words. The words he originally wanted to say were naturally arrogant, stubborn, sly, old liar and so on, but considering that the owner of this crystal is now himself, the nature of this matter has become completely different. He reached out to grab the magic crystal, wanting to put it away and study it later. This thing is naturally protected by a very complex spell. You have to shout out a corresponding password to enter Nicholas Flamel's dream, and it will not be easily broken or killed on first sight. But what William didn't expect was that the moment his fingertips touched the crystal, a net made of silver light suddenly appeared at his fingertips and swallowed the whole crystal whole. Chapter 149, Temple of Thought. In just 1 or 2 breaths, the magic crystal turned into countless points of light, scattered all over the ground, and the stone platform was empty. What happened? William was confused, but then a strange spell suddenly appeared in his mind. Said Sapientii, seed of wisdom. He subconsciously recited it. The world suddenly became dark, all perceptions became distant and strange, but only thoughts were different. William found that he was like in a library, with books everywhere, but their titles were not friends or readers. But July 24, 1991. As long as he opened this book, William could recall the day he had experienced. Is this a bit like the Mind Palace mentioned by Sherlock Holmes? William had such an idea. In the next moment, he found that it was no longer dark here, but in an extremely magnificent palace. It was made of white marble and the decoration style was very simple. William sat on the throne in the center of the hall, and countless bubbles surrounded him like his subjects. The closer the bubbles were to William, the richer the colors and the larger the size. They seemed to represent more precious and impressive memories. The smaller bubbles that were farther away from him, with a light translucent gray color, were irrelevant information. For example, one day in the past, William didn't bring an umbrella and was drenched by the sudden heavy rain. He had no place to hide from the rain, but when he finally found a place to stay, the rain stopped in a few minutes. Go away, William threw the bubble far away. I want to see last year's Christmas. William just had this idea, and several colorful bubbles flew in front of him. They included different situations, different characters, different themes, and even different senses. It took a whole day, but William instantly recalled his feelings at that time. He really envied Holmes' talent of organizing all information in an orderly manner in his mind, but according to Matteo Ricci's Palace of Memory, if you want to have such a palace of thought, you need to meet several very demanding conditions. First, you need to be able to think in multiple lines and quickly, and be able to quickly generate many ideas after observing things. Secondly, you need to have an extremely excellent memory, which not only means perfect image memory, but also requires him to be able to organize these memories efficiently. The most important point is the extremely strong reflex nerve. This is very close to Holmes' version. William came to a conclusion. Of course, he did not have a perfect memory, so the memory in his palace of thought could only be based on his impression at the time, which contained a lot of subjective factors and was not complete, but when William focused on recalling, he could observe many details that he had subconsciously ignored but remembered subconsciously. Does this palace of thought have other functions? William was a little curious. Although the functions it has shown so far are already extremely powerful, in this way, William can save a lot of time on memorization, which is very effective when dealing with Professor Bin's History of Magic course, referring to memorizing the test. People who sleep have no memory. Not only that, he can use it to slowly observe things that originally happened too fast, and to review experiments and spell practices. But he thought it was not against the law. Curious, William poked the bubbles in front of him one by one. Those colorful ones certainly represented his impressive memories, such as the powerful and invincible Voldemort, the secrets of Salazar Slytherin, the fragrance of the shampoo he developed, the deep passages of the Chamber of Secrets, etc. Wait? What is this? William found a different memory. Because it is not a memory, but information, and it is composed of many loose fragments. Summary and reflection on the experiment of extracting and transferring pneuma from the eggs of various magical creatures, the ultimate tension of the souls of muggles and wizards, foolish humans, souls deceived by memory rituals and mysterious patterns of necromancer high and unforgivable curses. They automatically transformed into titles that William was more familiar with, and turned into skills, which William mastered in an instant, although he had never practiced it even once. Now William could skillfully extract pneuma from the eggs of magical creatures and use it to create or transform the bodies of creatures. Not only that, he also mastered the spells of controlling memory and deceiving souls without a teacher. If he wanted, he could make the people under his control end up like Peter Pettigrew, or restore Peter Pettigrew's sanity. Sure enough, other people's wild areas are still better. William couldn't help but sigh. Originally, even with manuscripts and textbooks as references, these skills required a long period of learning and understanding, plus countless practice summaries, before they could be finally mastered, but now they became as natural as breathing for William. Moreover, they do not have any other memories or will attached, and can be safely absorbed. He roughly guessed their source. All souls captured by the silver light net released by William may have a part of them transformed into such bubbles, and most of these bubbles were contributed by Dr. John Dee, because he was the weakest at that time and escaped in a very embarrassing way. Marcus Flint's outrageous magic power is indeed not pie in the sky. William had to sigh that in the wizarding world, talent is indeed a very difficult gap to cross. In order to make a wizard like Quirrell or Marcus at that time, a large amount of high-quality pneuma needs to be implanted into his body. This is a long and very painful process. Only those with strong will, or deep hatred, can fully endure it. After that, he must go through the ritual of necromancy and replace his heart with a dead bell of Gelodius made of special metal material. Only then can he hear the wailing of the dead and squeeze the souls of the 9 victims and transform them into magic power. The more pain and resentment the 9 victims had before they died, the more magic power they could squeeze out, but their roars would have a greater impact on the wizard's mind. He could squeeze these souls without limit, but this also meant that the distance between him and death would become smaller and smaller. His body would be eroded by the dead and become corrupted. Only by constantly taking in pneuma, or replacing fresh flesh and blood with its inferior quality, could this process be delayed. Quirrell had always been rational enough, but Marcus soon fell into this false and powerful illusion. If it weren't for his poor ability, he would have been knocked down by Snape and the others before he had used much magic power. Even if the street Mungo's healers were Jesus, they wouldn't have been able to cure him. But Hagrid might have to say goodbye to his Norberta, William thought with some gloating, not counting the unlucky guys like Peter Pettigrew who just wanted to strengthen control. The pneuma used in Quirrell and Marcus Flint's transformation came from the same Norwegian Ridgeback dragon egg. In the original world, Quirrell gave the dragon egg to Hagrid and exchanged it from him for the secret of how to pass the 3-headed dog Fluffy. But in this world line, if Hagrid wants to draw dragon in the tavern, he may have to wait for other suckers. But think about it from another perspective. Hagrid is now giving away diamonds every day in the test server, and even drew a basilisk that is limited to the whole server. William suddenly felt not so happy. He felt that he needed to quickly introduce some magical creatures to make Hagrid's life more fulfilling, instead of sneaking into the tavern to draw cards and drink all day. Finite, abort, William said softly. Darkness swept across the entire magnificent palace, and the next moment, William was back in front of the door of hell. It has been repaired as before, but the painful human figures trapped on the door seemed to still have memories from not long ago. They saw William, tacitly retracted their hands, and glanced to the side or the ground, as if there were particularly charming patterns there. Raising the wand, William walked into the door. The blazing flames on both sides of the passage rushed towards him. Partis temporis, William cast a very unpopular spell. Its only function is to form 2 invisible air walls, dividing the things in front of them to their sides, and creating a temporary gap where the caster's magic wand points. But this spell has a very well-known variant. It is also effective on water. The Exodus in the Bible records that Moses faced the Sea of Reeds, raised his staff in his hand, and pointed at the sea water. The Israelites were surprised to see that the sea water suddenly separated and pushed to both sides to form a high wall of water. In the middle, a wide thoroughfare several miles wide was opened up. A gust of east wind blew, and the road was immediately dried up. If this is not enough to explain something, then when Moses led the Israelites he protected into the sea, a pillar of cloud made the Egyptian army fall into the fog and darkness and could not tell east, west, south, and north, but the Israelites on the other side of the pillar of cloud could see the road ahead clearly. In fact, in the wizarding world, there is a very famous magic item called the Hand of Glory. It is usually made from the hand of a hanged person, wrapped and soaked with mandrake or other herbs. The person holding the hand can use it to illuminate in the dark, but others cannot see it. Isn't this magic? After walking through this passage, William found himself in a new room. An old metal mirror was placed in the middle of the room. It looked very impressive, with a height of 1.5 William, a golden frame, and 2 claw-shaped feet underneath. The top of the mirror was engraved with Aristella Erhelu et Ubicafru et Invos, which is the mirror of Aries that can make people see the most urgent and strongest desire in their hearts. The spell Partis Temporis, flame separation, comes from the 6th novel, where Dumbledore used it to separate the flames to both sides. The earliest concept of the Palace of Thought came from Matteo Ricci's Palace of Thought. Pneuma is a concept in alchemy. It is extracted from Ix and is considered to be the material for making the Philosopher's Stone. There is a magical version here. Sed sapientiae, seed of wisdom, is the motto of the Catholic University of Louvain, Latin. Chapter 150 Parasite. The Mirror of Aries. It is a mirror that can reflect the things that people desire most in their hearts. It can be a guiding light, but it can also be a curse, especially when the person looking in the mirror can never achieve his goal. In the past, William had always been afraid of this mirror, but now standing in front of it, William suddenly had the urge to look at this mirror. After breaking away from his past self, William still didn't know clearly what he wanted to do in the future, but he knew that no matter what picture appeared in the mirror, he would no longer be afraid. Not bad, William approached the mirror of Aries. The picture appeared on the dark mirror. It was a boy with golden hair, holding a wand, looking at William quietly. The boy was wearing a black wizard robe with a Ravenclaw ribbon, with a relaxed smile on his lips. William raised his left hand and greeted him, and the self in the mirror also raised his hand and responded to him. The mirror of Aries seemed to have really turned into a mirror. William did not see any changes in himself, or who he was with or what he was doing, but there was no answer that made him happier than this. William in the mirror pointed to his right trouser pocket. William felt a hard object suddenly stuffed into his pocket. He reached out and took it out, and found that it was an irregular transparent gem with a dark amber color. It was about the length of a finger, and the surface felt cold. Is this the Philosopher's Stone? William looked at it carefully for a while, and threw the Philosopher's Stone back into the mirror. William in the mirror took it easily, watched it turn into a light spot and disappear, and a knowing smile appeared on his face. Dumbledore cast a spell on the Philosopher's Stone so that it would only be obtained by those who did not want to get the Philosopher's Stone. To be honest, William did not envy this powerful Philosopher's Stone. But he was also an alchemist. Accepting this Philosopher's Stone meant that he would be shackled by it when creating his own great work. For the rest of the day, William did not do any real work but stayed in the common room, lying on the bench like a salted fish. The red panda Gabe lazily lay on his knees, nudging William's hand with his wet nose from time to time. It was not until dinner time that William lazily went downstairs and walked towards the auditorium. "Ah, William, you're here. Come and sit here." As soon as he entered the auditorium, Hagrid, who was facing William, stood up and waved his arm to greet him. The rough-looking half-giant had a warm smile on his face. Since William's Grey Matter Center was completed, he has been buried there almost all day. In addition to the fire grey snakes, Hagrid also raised a group of nifflers, a few salamanders, and a large nest of slugs. Hagrid, Professor Kettleburn, Professor Lupin. After walking closer, William saw Professor Kettleburn, who was huddled behind Hagrid and looked like a small ball in contrast, and Remus Lupin. Not many students would stay in school during Christmas, so the hall was rearranged and students and professors sat together. There were 3 empty seats at the table, which should be reserved for Snape, Trelawney, and Dumbledore, who was sitting on the main seat. William pulled out the chair next to Lupin and sat down. "William, the centaurs in the forest want to see you so that they can thank you in person," Lupin whispered. After the fire in the Forbidden Forest, he was entrusted by Dumbledore to help the centaurs with the aftermath. Whether it was the repair of the camp or the care of the wounded, they could use the help of an excellent wizard. He was a wizard, but also a werewolf, so in the eyes of those stubborn centaurs, Lupin's wizard smell was not so strong. Although the centaurs did not like werewolves, they hated wizards more. How are they? I mean the centaurs bitten by the werewolves, William suddenly thought. On that night, although it was not a full moon, the werewolves were controlled and forcibly triggered their transformation forms, turning into human wolves. Their teeth contain toxins that will turn the injured into werewolves. Many centaurs were bitten by werewolves that day. They were still affected by the werewolf toxin, but I don't know if it's because centaurs are stronger than humans, or because werewolves didn't really transform that day, so the harm of the toxin is much lighter than we expected. Lupin was also confused about this question. Much lighter? William urged Lupin to answer. This is a very interesting topic. Yes, I think you should also know that after being bitten by a werewolf in a transformed state, humans will slowly be cursed and turn into werewolves on the full moon night, of course. In the second week of Snape's temporary teaching of the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, he couldn't wait to change the course content of all grade students to werewolves, and ask them to write a long paper as homework. Those centaurs didn't turn into werewolves, but that doesn't mean they weren't affected. As far as I know, the centaurs that were bitten now prefer uncooked meat, and like to shout at the moon when the moon is full. Thinking of what the centaurs looked like on the night of the full moon, Lupin felt a little speechless. As a proper werewolf, he had to drink the bitter wolfsbane potion to stay sane on the night of the full moon, but the effect of the wolfsbane potion was only to keep him awake, but it couldn't stop Lupin from turning into a wolf. When he was conscious, it was a very painful experience to change from a human to a wolf and back again. He felt that all the bones in his body were creaking, being stretched and thickened. This is very interesting. William noticed something unusual. According to John Dee's scientific research results, the bodies of centaurs and humans are not that different. Their organs and functions are basically the same as those of humans, but basically every part is enhanced, and they have a very powerful digestive tract. It is possible that the toxins that act on the human body will have the same effect on centaurs. Unless the werewolf's toxin is not actually a toxin, but a magic for humans, William thought of a possibility. On top of this possibility, William suddenly thought of an idea that might be a bit absurd, but he thought it might be very feasible. All along, in terms of communication with the architect Mr. Anderson, he used the house elf Lalo to send messages back and forth. In Godric's Hollow, wizards and ordinary people live together, so the occasional appearance of magic around ordinary people's lives will not make the Ministry of Magic suspicious. Only in this way will Mr. Anderson not see magic with his own eyes, and will not trigger the Ministry of Magic's detection mechanism. But what if Mr. Anderson is not an ordinary person? It is indeed a bit early for him to become a squib at his age. May God bless his health. But if he can become a magical creature recognized by the Ministry of Magic, wouldn't he be able to contact William openly? Professor Lupin, I would like to entrust you to contact the centaurs. I want to meet them after the Christmas holiday. William decided to try to make it work. Centaurs are of course only an option, because they are rare magical creatures with sociality. Although they were very angry about the Ministry of Magic classifying them as magical creatures, they completely refused to associate with wizards. Of course, no problem, they will be happy to see you too. Recently, there are suddenly fewer eight-eyed giant spiders in the Forbidden Forest, and their daily work has become easier. Lupin agreed very readily. The atmosphere at the table was very relaxed. Soon after, Snape and Trelawney also came down from upstairs and joined them. Snape has not given a clear answer to William's invitation, but when William mailed him the first month's salary as an advance payment, he did not return it. Dumbledore walked in from outside the hall. He was wearing a silk purple robe and his face was full of smiles. Although there are not many people left in the castle, it seems that you have begun to enjoy the festive atmosphere. Dumbledore sat on the main seat and said with a smile, I think, at this time, no one wants to listen to an old guy's complaints, so, let's eat. He stood up and announced with his hands clapping. A sumptuous meal suddenly appeared on the table. This was perhaps the most sumptuous dinner since the founding of Hogwarts. More than 100 house elves worked together to come up with many new dishes. They spent a long time studying the recipes William found for them, and even at this moment, they were still serving the guests who were enjoying the Christmas Eve dinner at the Secret of the Nymph. The highlight of the dinner was a whole roasted and then fried beef tenderloin. The house elves spent several hours marinating it, then slowly heated it in the oven, and finally cooked it in a frying pan at high temperature, so that the beef formed a layer of crust with a charred aroma. As the side dishes of this shiny beef tenderloin, there were mushrooms with fragrant gravy, mashed potatoes that were roasted until they would become soft when tapped with the back of a spoon, and white asparagus that was lightly fried and sprinkled with black pepper and coarse salt. Of course, how can the British Christmas be without the classic roasted whole turkey and various pies? In addition, at the Christmas dinner, in addition to pumpkin juice, a very classic drink, various iced carbonated drinks were added for the first time. Although many students from wizarding families were a little confused, they soon accepted and liked these sodas. Professors can enjoy a variety of alcoholic beverages, wine, whiskey, sherry, and eggnog freshly mixed by the house elves. William spent more than £100,000 to build the wine cellar of Secret of the Nymph, and today, alcoholic beverages are available to professors of Hogwarts in unlimited quantities. Merlin, hallelujah! Hagrid raised his own scary big wine glass and said a toast indistinctly. God knows where he heard hallelujah from. Professor Flitwick was also drunk. He stepped on a chair, waved his wand, and pulled down a bunch of parasites hanging above the hall, turning them into various musical instruments. This band even played a lively polka. Phileas, you should set an example for the students. Professor McGonagall put on a serious expression, but her cheeks were also red. She also took out her wand and added yellow gingerbread men with funny hats to the instruments that Professor Flitwick had conjured up, and asked them to cooperate in blowing and playing. Phileas, transfiguration must not only be complete, but also real. Burp. Professor McGonagall covered her mouth and burped lightly. Man, I never thought that the Christmas dinner in the castle would be so interesting. I will never go home for Christmas in the future. And this black soda, what is it called? Ron hugged Harry and said excitedly. Coke, Coca-Cola, Harry corrected Ron's statement, but he was also excited. Growing up in the Dursley family, he had never had such an experience, many people sitting together and happily enjoying a dinner. Hey! Don't let Mom know, She will definitely cry. Fred joined their conversation. Her darling Ron will never come home again. What should she do? George came over with 2 cups of Coke. William, who helped plan this dinner, sat at his seat and enjoyed a glass of cold orange juice. It was freshly taken out of the refrigerator and still had large pieces of fruit pulp in it. There was no one around him. Lupin was dragged along by the drunk Hagrid and danced to the tune played by the gingerbread man, while Professor Kettleburn sat next to Professor Sprout. But William himself felt that this feeling was very comfortable. When he raised his glass, he met Dumbledore, who was sitting in the main seat. Dumbledore smiled and winked at him, added a small piece of sugar cube to his eggnog, and raised his glass from a distance. William also raised his glass and clinked it with the White Wizard. The dinner lasted for a long time. Fred and George brought a tune of Christmas songs, and almost everyone, except Snape, joined in and integrated into the festive atmosphere. When William returned to the Ravenclaw common room, it suddenly became quiet. He even felt a little uncomfortable. The house elf Lalo suddenly appeared in front of William. Mr. Buffalo, can you please go to your place with me? He asked very respectfully. Of course, where is it? What's the matter? William felt a little confused. House elves rarely make requests on their own initiative, and they will not be so secretive like this. Please give me your hand. Lalo did not answer William's question. With a puff sound, accompanied by a slight distortion that has become increasingly familiar, William found himself in a square. There's a very, very tall Christmas tree here, decorated with ribbons and stars of various colors. The ribbons woven with mistletoe and holly form beautiful shapes in the air, and there are flickering candles on them. The ground of the square is covered with a light layer of snow, and every few distances, there is a small ball of light to provide lighting. This is the Grey Center. The beautifully decorated Grey Center. After bringing him here, the house elf Lalo suddenly disappeared, but more figures appeared one after another: Penelope, Ginny, Gemma, Harry, Hermione, Ron, Fred, George, Zhangqiu, Margarita, and many other faces that William only remembered seeing but was not very familiar with. I think you must feel a little lonely at the Christmas dinner in the castle, so I asked. But it seems that you are more popular than I thought. Penelope quietly walked to William's side. Her home must be very cold, because Penelope's cheeks were red. Thank you, William said softly. If he said he was not touched, he would be lying. Hey, Fred suddenly shouted loudly. William looked in the direction. He, George, Percy, and Angelina were waving their wands and throwing a mistletoe ribbon that exuded a warm glow. William just wanted to dodge, but he found that his body had been fixed. Penelope had taken out her wand without knowing when. The top of her wand turned into many ropes and tied William up. The ribbons of mistletoe and holly passed over their heads. William thought of the traditional customs of Christmas. Under the mistletoe. It's Christmas. I read the original book several times. Some say that Christmas was spent together at school, in the secret room, while others say that they had an early holiday and stayed in the castle. So here we follow the first part, where everyone goes back to their own homes and finds their own mothers, and those who stay in the castle spend Christmas together. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.